Vincent.
Hey Jeff, how you doing?
Good. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Man, this is
Good to be
awesome.
here finally, huh?
What's that?
Finally,
I
after
know. Sorry, your life's been kind of crazy, man. I hope things are settling down.
yeah, they finally are.
Good.
Uh,
I'm
I
glad.
was just becoming boring.
Well, that's sometimes a good thing, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm glad it's getting better. Yeah, man, it's great to have you. I've been wanting to have you on forever. So yeah, I'm super excited about this. Your work is so freaking good. So good. And I mean, I've known about you since I was in college. And I mean, yeah, you've been a huge inspiration. So this is going to be exciting. So where do you live? You're in New York, right?
No, I'm in Ridgefield, Connecticut now. I was in Westchester, around Tarrytown, and
Oh,
a few
okay.
years ago I moved here to Ridgefield, which is actually kind of nice. We have a house here. I don't have a studio though, which is kind of a pain in the ass.
How in the
Uh,
world are you working that out?
well, it's funny. The uh, 2 summers ago, a pipe burst in our house on the third floor while we were in Europe, and the water flowed out for like 2 solid weeks. So the house was totally destroyed. So as insurance was fixing the house, we were staying in another house that was once owned by Ace Frehley from Kiss,
No
and
way.
it was like a rock and roll museum. There was a theater downstairs, and there was a room with pinball machines, and the sound studio at the bottom of the house, in the basement with like 15-foot ceilings, was my
Oh,
studio for the year that the house was being built. And there, I was able to paint 2 giant pictures, which I felt happy about. But now we're back, and I'm building a studio next door, which it has not started yet. But once that gets going, I'll have a place to work.
oh man, that's exciting. A lot of people in Utah are building studios, and I'm envious because then you to get everything exactly how you want it.
Yeah, that's true. And it's finally, I mean, I've had some really beautiful studios in the past, but renting. And then I built one in my basement of the house in New York, and I worked there for a number of years. But this will be the first time I have, big north window and skylight and giant walls, because I tack the paintings onto the wall. Generally, that's how I work.
So
I stay.
do you get up on a ladder to get high on it, or that's how you do it?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, ladder, which is kind of exhausting.
Yeah,
It's like doing a small painting is just as hard as doing a big painting, but doing a big
dude,
painting
can I show
requires
you
so much.
something?
Yeah.
I need to send you the plans for this because you might find, well, unless you have it depends. If you're building, you have a lot of options, but let me show you something I built in my studio because I also paint big. And let me see. Hold on one sec. Like I said, I paint big, and I got tired of going up and down a ladder. And so I designed this easel, and I freaking love it. Every artist that paints big should have one of these. Let me see if I can find it here. So the monitor. So this is an Instagram account that's called Jeff HEIN Studio. It's where I put things that I build rather than things that I paint.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I love to build stuff.
Oh, cool.
And let's see, where is it? Okay, right here. Check this out.
Oh, get out of town. I had one of those. Oh my God. You
Yeah, you
built
can
it?
roll the canvas all the way up and all the way down, so you don't have to be up and down on a ladder. And you can put it on both sides. It carries a canvas on both sides.
Where does it go when it rolls down?
It goes all the way around it. It just goes around it.
So what you're working on at the bottom is wet?
Doesn't matter. It's off the floor by like 4 inches.
Oh, and it can just,
It just goes under. It's like there's 2 rolling pins. There's a rolling pin on the top and a rolling pin on the bottom. And it rolls around the back and inside.
and it's up against a metal plate or
It's up against dye bond. I mean, it could be anything. It could be wood. It could be anything. But it's a dye bond. It's basically just an aluminum and plastic plate that's mounted on a metal frame. So anyway,
that is the most amazing thing I had something like that made out of wood. It was just one side and it wasn't really very functional. And I had to leave it where it was. But that is great.
yeah, well, if you're getting tired of going up and down on a ladder, because I was, and the other thing about it is, it's like, I don't know about you, and I'm anxious to know how you work, but when I built this, I worked exclusively from life. And so I couldn't bring my models up on a ladder, right? So my perspective would change as I went up and down the ladder, which was a problem.
Right.
And that was my main motivator. Now I use photography a little bit more, but even still, you got to worry about where's your reference. And I suppose if you're painting entirely from imagination, that wouldn't matter. But anyway,
that's true. But I love that. Yeah. I that's one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
Oh, thanks.
So you make them now.
I don't make them, but I made that one, right? But I drew up plans. So if you want them, I'll send them to you. But a lot of other guys are building basements, and they'll lower the canvas down into a slot in the floor.
Yeah, that's how Chuck Close used to do it.
Yeah. So there's other options, but anyway, I just thought you might find that interesting since you also paint big. Although you paint really big. I mean, what's the biggest work you've done?
The biggest work I've done was a triptych called Quixote, and it's 40 feet wide.
Holy crap.
Well, it's 3 panels. The center panel is like 28 feet wide. And then there are 2 side panels that, bring it up to 40, I think. Yeah.
How tall was it?
It's about 9 feet.
Jeez Louise, man.
It was, that's the biggest one. But I just finished the ones I finished in my studio at the Kiss House were also very big. One was of a giant wave, and another one was of a huge party scene in front of in a house that had these weird modernist windows with a big rock formation outside.
Wow.
So it was giant, and it's I say it is out of my head. I constructed the space from imagination, and then I have to place. There are 20 figures or so in there, and each one of them. I mean, I'll find research. I'll find some kind of source material.
Right.
I'll look for a person, or I'll photograph myself, or I'll get my wife to say, or my grandchild in one case.
Right.
Photographs. Then I'll use it, but melding it all together, deciding on where the light is and the general chromatic effect of it, and all that. So really 90% of it, 95% is out of my head. And
see, that's so depressing. That's so, it's depressing because it's so unachievable for me. I don't know how you could do 95% out of your head. That's insane.
Well, it's like, I mean, when you think about it, when was art not done that way? Only in the most recent history. I mean, what was Michelangelo looking at when he devised the Sistine Chapel, or Raphael when he, painted the School of Athens? I mean,
yeah, fair enough. But don't you think that the Renaissance painters, their work, obviously the artists you mentioned are off the charts amazing, but their work was sort of, it wasn't naturalistic. It was sort of idealized, almost characterized in some cases. Where you're doing naturalistic work, you're doing portraits. I mean, they're like real people.
It's completely made up. It's like,
come on, are you serious?
Yeah, I'm serious. It's the thing about it is that it's never an ideal, and it's always an artifice, and the artifice is developed to make a particular point at a particular time.
Right.
So when Michelangelo decided that he would abandon the Neoplatonic sort of grace of his earlier work and began doing these incredibly massive, heavy things, it was a stylistic choice that was driven by the need to envision human beings as virtually incapable of making that ascent back to the divine, you know,
Mm-hmm.
crisis, and it engendered the beginning of mannerism, uh, uh, and uh, and then Pontormo. You know, there's nothing ideal about his forms. So they're complete, like the deposition. It's completely invented in order to create a certain kind of sensation at a particular time when
Wow.
it's appropriate. So when I do these things out of my head, I'm using a stylization that is born of Baroque and 19th century, some 19th century painting, in order to revisit a particular visual strategy that may be potentially fruitful for the further development or the replenishment of painting, you know,
Hmm.
because painting really hit a brick wall. And and modernism, which I love with all of my heart, uh, you know, came to an end, really. It sort of petered out. And basically, instead of seeing that as the end of history or the end of art, as like Dante or Donald Cuthbert would call it, I simply see it as the sort of passing, the end of a huge, fantastic trajectory, starting with Giotto and ending in 1959 with Foucault's Death of Man. And then, but now we're charged with a different purpose, probably closer to the original purpose of art. Because you see, painting blossomed at not blossomed, it began to sprout at a particular time in history, on the heels of the Middle Ages and at the beginning of the work of the humanists, who actually were very critical of the language that was used, the Latin used by the Middle Age, the scholastics of the Middle Ages, that they began understanding the rhetorical flourishes that existed in classical literature, and that those things were actually incredibly fruitful for the imagination. And so you have at that point these two camps, the sort of metaphysicians and the physicists, you know, the physics and metaphysics in the scholastic. The humanists come up and they occupy a place between the two, where it's not quite faith and it's not quite physics, but it actually produces, you know, a blossoming of potential ideas. And those ideas are manifested certainly in the poetry of Petrarch and people like that, but then in painting as well. So painting occupies a position between metaphysics and physics to the scholastic mind, you know, and
Hmm.
to me that is, uh, how do I get on that subject?
I don't
Do
know,
you
but it's really interesting and really humbling because I have your knowledge of art history is really impressive because I'm only following about 2/3 of it.
well, I don't want to be too. I mean, I usually like spin off into these ridiculous.
No, it's so interesting and it's so I don't know, it's a romantic view of painting. I think sometimes I tend to oversimplify it maybe. And just like I'm making pictures, you know, and your description of it is so much more romantic than
Well, I understand the. Believe me, I understand that the impulse, and I have it in myself to say I'm just making pictures. And here's why: it's because when I do make the pictures, all of this sort of theoretical and historical stuff goes out the window. It doesn't go out the window; it goes on the back burner.
okay.
And it boils there until it can no longer be contained by its pot, and then it effervesces, and the effervescence is what painting is for me. So it really is like a change of state, and it is. there's the memory and the pressure of all of my thinking about art. But when it comes to making the painting, I'm just making a painting. And I have to say
Right.
to myself, making a painting, and what comes out, comes out. And what comes out, I have to have faith is going to be reflective in some sense of what, I have been going through mentally.
Right.
I have that it will, without my trying to force that. Like, I'm not going to say, now I'm going to illustrate, an idea from Tasso because I want to express the Matterist sort of approach to, I don't do that at all. It's just sort of totally automatic and spontaneous. But the other part of my brain is like fascinated with this stuff, like it's like investigating a crime. Really, it's kind of like that. It's really investigating a crime. I'm trying to figure out what the hell painting ever was, what it is, why we've been doing it since we were cavemen. You
Mm.
know, how many things have you doing exactly the same way since we were cavemen? I
It is
mean,
really remarkable.
I mean, we're smearing stuff on a surface,
Yeah.
and yet,
And the
and
rest of the world isn't. Everything is modernized. I mean, there are other crafts, woodworkers, leatherworkers, but even like take woodworkers. I mean, so much is made by machine now. I mean, so many crafts have been replaced by machines. Painting is still, well, I guess we could get into the AI topic, but aside from that, painting is still so pure. It's smearing mud around on a canvas until it becomes an image.
if you talk to, I don't, I see painting as definitely different than craft, uh, but if you talk to a woodworker or to a potter or to people who make things with their hands, frankly, the thing that's most important about it is the enjoyment, the insight that they're developing for themselves. Even if their stuff didn't sell or any, they would still be doing it because there's something about it that engages the mind in a way that is different than other types of engagement, right? And
Mm-hmm.
painting's the same way. It's really just we do it even if the work doesn't sell. We will still be doing it because I think it accesses a certain avenue of cognition within the brain that is not accommodated in other ways. Uh, and painting
Yeah.
is so complex, it's so rich and so complex. I can't stop thinking about it or engaging with it.
Yeah. You know, this reminds me of a conversation I had recently with a woodworker. His name's Jerry Weixler. His family, the Weixler and Company, they're the premier furniture makers in Utah. Their furniture fills all the wealthiest homes in Utah, and it's incredible. And Jerry, I know him personally, and he is a genius. I mean, in every way. His daughter told me he puts the books by his bed are calculus books, right? So that's what he reads in his pastime. He's a really smart guy. But
Love
he's
it.
really unassuming and kind of quiet. And one day we were at a party. I was just recently at a Christmas party at one of our mutual clients' homes, and I was admiring all the furniture he had around their house, and just kind of, praising him up and down because I just love woodworking. So I'm like, "How did you do this? How did you do that?" Anyway, I said something to him. I said, I could totally have been happy being a woodworker too, because it's such a beautiful art form. And he said, yeah, and I could have been happy doing what you're doing. He says, I just love to problem solve. It doesn't matter if it's wood or whatever. I just love problem solving.
You
And
know,
I
I,
thought that is so it for me too.
that really is it. I you know I get really depressed when I don't paint, and I don't like thinking about other stuff because it seems so boring to me, and I feel dead inside. But once I started painting, I started the other day working on a painting, and at first I just said, "Oh, I want to quit. I don't want to quit. I don't want to do this." And then all of a sudden something happened. I went, "Oh, okay." And then all of a sudden the problem solving kicked in. And I realized I love to solve the problem. If my wife told me, build a shelf in the closet, I would love to do it just for the problem, the solving. It's a simple problem, but
Yeah.
it's so vast in its complexity that the problems are like playing five-dimensional chess. But boy, I love them.
Yeah. That's great that you feel that way as well. I wonder how many artists feel that way. I should ask that question more often. because it rung so true to me. It's totally what it is. It has nothing to do with making pictures for me. It's just this medium provides an environment where my mind can thrive, you know?
That's right. And
Yeah.
the rewards of painting are actually best reserved for the person making the pictures. We're the ones who get the most out of the whole experience.
Yeah.
And other people stand like spectators and see what you've done. But really what you've done is enhanced your own thinking and your own sense of enlightenment. And that's the thing that the problem solving, as the result of the problem solving, just sort of going, aha, oh, okay, that's how that works, and it's so exciting.
It is. Now, what you just said there makes me wonder if you would agree with this. I've often said to my students that I'm not, I mean, of course I would like a legacy. Of course I would like to be remembered. I mean, who wouldn't, right? But my main motivation in going to the easel, or my main motivation becoming better as an artist, is just that. It's my own personal growth. It's not so much the painting, because when the painting's done, it goes somewhere and it's forgotten. And now I'm back to the easel again, trying to improve me, like me, not the paintings. Right?
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I agree that when my paintings are done, they're like corpses to me. It's like because and they're done when I've gotten everything out of them that I could possibly get out of it. That's when they're done. And I feel like I either got something out of it or I got nothing out of it, and it's a failure. But I think that the reason I want to keep doing it is in order to leave equipment behind for future young artists, for my grandchildren, for the students that I teach. I want to leave them something they could use and riff off of and disagree with completely, but something solid that they could actually identify as a point of discourse, and they can do with it what they want. That's the most important thing. It sort of justifies my wanting to be remembered, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But in the artificial sense of the market, which I think is ridiculous and bullshit.
Yeah, it is. Do you think painting will be relevant in 3 or 4 generations? Do you think it's permanent? Its relevance?
Yep.
You do? I do too.
You've been doing it since we were cavemen. A lot of things.
It is a different time though now. I mean, since the Industrial Revolution, things have sped up. Technological progress has sped up so fast, right? So yeah, we've been doing it since we were cavemen right up until the early 20th century. And then the world changed dramatically. And now it's so strange. I still think it'll be relevant, but if it was ever going to change, if it was ever going to become irrelevant, it would be now. I mean,
well, you have to see that. I mean, the 20th century to me is one of the most fruitful and exciting periods of painting.
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't say things hit a kind of pitch in terms of industrialization at the beginning of the century and the development of science and things like that. But here's what I think has happened. If I could say this, when the Renaissance happened, when Giotto and Brunelleschi did the first demonstration of perspective and things like that, at that point, philosophy and science were the same thing. Mm-hmm. You weren't a scientist yet; you were a natural philosopher. So 2 camps of philosophy, and the natural philosophers evolved. Like Newton was a natural philosopher. Eventually, science broke off from philosophy, but originally, science and philosophy were exactly the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. And ethics and metaphysics was something else. But science was what philosophy was. What's going on in the world? What is phenomenon? How do we know this stuff? How can we tell it's true? How can we prove that it actually happened? Can we replicate an experiment to make sure this is what reality really is? That's all philosophy. Mm-hmm. And so, and there's conjoined. And along the way, painting also became conjoined with that. And there was this remarkable progress within scientific development that painting and other things sort of attached themselves to.
Wait, I'm not sure I understand. How did painting conjoin?
Painting
with science?
Well, what I'm saying is we look at the history of painting from Giotto to abstract expressionism as a
Yeah.
kind of continuity, right?
Right.
And we look at it also in terms of advancement, right? Things got, in many senses, more interesting. They were developed. They were advanced. And the whole idea of the avant-garde is sort of this idea that it's moving in advance of other things,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like science moves in advance of other things. So this idea of that kind of teleological progression toward some kind of future goal, was part of what was in art and philosophy with Hegel and people like that. But I don't think at a certain point now we're seeing that science is still going and art is not. Art's not
Yeah. And
getting,
that's strange, isn't it?
unless you say AI. And AI is not the answer really, because AI will get better and better and better and better, but art will stay the same. But see, what that means is that the myth of artistic progression uh, is now being in our minds debunked. We're seeing, well, we had to live through it, but now we see that in any given time, art was always as great as it ever could be. When Velasquez painted, it was as great as it could be. When de Kooning painted, it was as great as it could be. When Giotto painted, it was as great as it could be. So it always reaches its high mark, depending upon the fertility of the soil from which it grows. I mean, there are some parts and times in history, like now, where the soil is not very well nourished. There's not a lot of nutrition in the soil, so things are growing, kind of deformed and kind of, I think personally.
So
But
do you feel like today is the exception where we're not as high as we could be as a collectively?
I think we will be as high as we can be, but that height might not be as great as the Renaissance
Right.
because the soil from which the stuff is springing is has is needs to be reinvigorated.
Hmm.
You know, uh, so
What makes up the soil? What is
I
it that we're missing?
I think it's a lot of things. I think it's sort of the sort of philosophical, work that's done in the decades before. I think that it's sort of the artists just being tired of the academic nature of art in a specific time. For example, now the academy is like the art market, and the salon is Art Basel.
Mm-hmm.
That's it's the ugliest kind of nightmare of what the avant-garde tried to move away from. The official art, official art of the salon, official art of the art market, official art of you know, the millionaire class, the billionaire class that sort of invests in art as if it were some kind of stock. You know,
Yeah,
when
I kind of wonder if well, let me tell you an experience I had
yeah,
and then ask you a question. So I had a portrait I did of a senator. I don't do a lot of official portraits, but when this one came to me many years ago, it was probably 15, 20 years ago. I was like, oh, I'll give this a shot. So I did this senator from Oregon and I flew down to Washington, D.C. And he's walking me around the Capitol Rotunda. We're looking for a location for the background and so on. And then he's taking me through all these tunnels from building. I don't know if you've seen any of this stuff, but they have tunnels from building to building.
yeah,
It's
right.
crazy. And with like trains in the tunnels it's crazy. So we're going through all this stuff and I'm just in awe at the architecture in DC. It's like no other city in the country, right? And it's sort of reminiscent of older architecture in Europe, right?
Yeah.
And so I was commenting on that and he said, he said, that is the one, these are his words, of course, that there's one negative of capitalism is that these are the last buildings the United States will ever have like this, because capitalism is not a fertile ground for great art and architecture. And then I've thought about that, like say with this banana that just sold for $3 million or whatever it was. And how money is moved around in the art market and how it seems so almost fraudulent sometimes. And it's like, but it all it seems like it's capitalism that's driving this thing. If we can make a buck off of it by changing the narrative, we'll do it, which in my opinion might be hindering the growth or at least the potential of art collectively. What are your thoughts on that?
We talk about AI and capitalism, okay, and we talk about how the modern world technologies, manufacture, things like that, have evolved in order to essentially get the product out faster and be able to change it swiftly enough so that money can be made from it,
and as cheaply as possible.
as cheaply as possible.
Right.
Okay, that is only tied to economics. Only. I mean, there are instances where you can make a cup of coffee better if you do it this way, or things like that. But basically, the whole idea of AI is born of the sort of Henry Ford idea that you create an assembly line and you do it fast, and this is the most effective way to get the product out there. It's all product oriented. We just got finished saying that the products are corpses to us.
Yeah.
The real importance of what we're doing exists because we're actually enlightening ourselves and maybe leaving a trace of that enlightenment in the work for other people to find and to grow from, which is a completely different thing than manufacturing something in the easiest, most economical possible way in order to get it out there so that it can be a product and sold. You see, that's the whole fallacy of AI.
I know. Like the pyramids would never have been built because the pharaoh would have been like, this is not economically smart. Like I can't, but he had a higher purpose, whatever that was in his mind, a higher purpose. I mean, I guess it's still being debated what that purpose was, but, and there's so many other things that have been created over time. The Sistine Chapel, like that probably wasn't the smartest the smartest financial decision for the Pope, but he had a purpose. There was something more important to him than the bottom line.
Well, for him, it may have been, his legacy, which was egotistical. I know for Sixtus IV, decorating the lower part of that chapel in it was 1475 in anticipation of the Holy Year, but also because the kingdom of, I think, Spain or France was encamped in the kingdom of Naples, and he could see the smoke from the encampment. They were about to again attack Rome. Rome was a political entity, the city, the papal states. Mm-hmm. They were being about to be under attack. He wanted these frescoes completed because the frescoes show this direct line from Moses, the Moses cycle, to Christ, and then from Christ to the popes, and then all of the popes around, and the primacy of the Pope. So do not attack us because my position comes directly from Yahweh, from the Old Testament.
Right.
He was using them thinking that they would be, propagandistic tools in a certain sense. But there's been some great architecture in modernism, though. I mean,
that's fair. There really has. I love modern architecture.
And the ultra rich are funding it. So for architecture, which is, there's a lot to be gained economically from having a beautiful space to conduct your business in and impress your clients and all of that. Plus, the hubris of wanting to have, funded a Frank Gehry building with your name on it, all of that. But painting, again, is not, if you take the whole operation away from the market, right? And you think of it only in terms of, what the simplest thing is what we do in our studios, the safest place for us, the most exciting place to be, where we feel that we actually can have a say in things, even though that say might have the effect on society like the wings of a butterfly in chaos theory. It may take forever, and yet the perpetual doing of the thing, it means a lot. I think people, when the curtain, as Sidney Goodman said, once that when the curtain comes down, the people take a second look. And I always wondered why he put it that way. But what it is that when we get to the point where we say painting is finished, then people will go, wait a minute, they'll take a second look and they'll go, oh my God, this is what painting is. And they'll get excited about it again. Painting will never die. Never.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But it's an interesting thing to think about. So let's back way up. I imagine we'll get more into this philosophical stuff later again, but I want to know about you personally. So where were you born? You know, what were you like as a child? How did you end up becoming an artist?
Well,
Can I ask when you were born?
I was born in 1955.
So it would have been less likely for you, or I would have been a less reasonable decision for you to become an artist than it was for me, because I'm 20 years younger than you. And it would have been certainly much less reasonable than someone 20 years younger than me, right? You were born at a time where becoming an artist was, especially a representational artist, was just not widely accepted as a reasonable career choice. So how did that whole thing come about? This episode is brought to you in part by Rosemary Brushes. If you're one of my listeners who's a professional artist, you're already using Rosemary Brushes. But for the rest of you, come on. Take your work a little more seriously. Stop buying the other brands. It's just not worth it. Every now and then you may get lucky and buy a good brush from another brand, but use the brand that professionals like myself are using. Go to rosemaryandco.com, link in the description or the show notes, and get yourself some quality brushes before your next painting.
Well, I mean, my parents were, really of an artistic bent. I mean, my grandparents, all four of my grandparents are Abruzzese. They're all from Italy. So I'm 100% Italian. My father wanted to be a musician. He was a violinist, but his father said, no, as an immigrant father, you're going to be a doctor. So he wound up going to medical school. My mother was a fashion illustrator, and she did that until she got pregnant with the first of 5 boys. And she was pregnant for about 10 years, popping us out one after the other. I was the second.
No girls, huh?
No girls. And so we grew up kind of insular, and my father blasting opera records every morning, just waking up to Tosca and, Johnny Schicchi and all this stuff every morning. And these lavish parties that they were not like, rich or anything, but they would have these incredible parties they called musicals, where they would invite all their friends, and some of them were famous singers, and some of them were, and they would go on and on till 6 in the morning.
Really?
The police would come to the door and say, Doc, turn down the music. The neighbors are complaining, and my father's response sometimes would be to turn the speakers out to the window so that the whole neighborhood would be flooded with. I mean, it was a bit insane. And
And where was this?
Media, Pennsylvania.
Where is that?
It's near Swarthmore.
Is that like central?
Suburb of Philadelphia.
Oh, so it's eastern Pennsylvania. Okay.
Yeah. I was born in South Philly. And I lived there for, I think, 9 months before my parents moved out to the suburbs.
Gotcha. Okay.
I grew up in Springfield, then we moved to Media. And when I was there, I was kind of more interested in acting, actually. And then filmmaking and acting when I was really little. But when
filmmaking? What?
Yeah.
Well, you didn't have access to cameras or anything. Not like we do.
No, we didn't have that at all. But I was thinking in terms of like Fellini and going into the business,
Oh, okay.
through acting and that sort of thing. But when I was 12, I don't know what happened, but in a massive sublimation of all of my adolescent sexual urges, I became fascinated with Michelangelo and then the Renaissance. And I was 12, and I painted the creation of man on our garage ceiling.
What?
Uh, yeah,
Are you serious? That's
it was,
amazing.
it
Your
was
parents were
stupid.
totally okay with that?
No, they weren't. They wouldn't let me do it. And then they went away on a trip for like a weekend
No way.
and started it. And when they came back, they saw it. And it was one of those ceilings that are all textured. So I
Like a
was like,
popcorn ceiling?
and I was, the brushes were like falling apart, but I just kept doing it. And they came home and they saw it and they were, they were like, wow, this is great. They were supportive, very supportive of me.
That's amazing.
So I painted this thing, which is stupid. But I began reading art history then, and transcribing Frederick Hart's. I did that. I was trying to understand it, so I would transcribe Frederick Hart's History of the Italian Renaissance in my journal at school. And I just became more.
It's so unusual for a preteen. I mean, most preteens are outside playing. That's what I was doing. I was like, we were shooting BB guns at each other at 12 years old. And you're in there reading books about Michelangelo?
If you put a BB gun in my hand at the time, I would be shooting it too. But then going back inside and reading this stuff, I liked all this stuff,
Yeah.
But I don't know what it was. It started with Michelangelo and then moving from Michelangelo to all of the other aspects of the Renaissance, then going back to the beginning of it. And then it grew and grew when I finally went to college. I studied art history at Bryn Mawr, and I was a Haverford student, undergraduate at Haverford, and painting there, doing theater as well. And then I went to Europe, and I always wanted to go to Italy, to Florence, and I saw it for the first time, and I was going crazy. And
Just by yourself?
Yeah, I spent a year there.
Really?
I was supposed to be enrolled in the Accademia di Belle Arti, but it was closed all the time because of strikes. Students would be on strike, the teachers would, the models would be on strike. So they gave me a certificate that I could use to get into any museum for free, as a student there. And the interesting thing was, it was during the years of lead in the 70s, in 1977. And when I went into the academy to meet the dean or whoever it was that I had to speak to, I had to walk through the courtyard to take the stairs up. When I went through the courtyard, all of the plaster casts and sculptures were smashed, spray painted with red, with Brigade Rosso, the A, the star in a circle, and then Morta I Preti and pictures of Che Guevara. So it was a very volatile political time. And the place was sacked, really. And they weren't doing anything to fix it up at that point. There was no point in doing it. So I lived there for a year, and then I came back and applied to graduate school, to Penn and to Yale. I was rejected from every one of them. And then I went
when you were applying, what were you intending to study? Art history still?
No, painting, but abstract.
Painting.
I was painting abstractly.
Okay.
And then my mother applied to the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts for me. I really didn't want to go there. But once I got there, I realized that it was a great, great school. And so I was there for 4 years, painting abstractly pretty much the whole time I was there. And graduated from there in 83. And by 84, I was in New York at PS1. I got a studio at PS1, where I was there for 2 years. And that was a crash course in the art world. But yeah, I had hit a brick wall at a certain point painting abstractly in 84 while I was still in Philadelphia. And I just decided that I'm just going to jump ship completely from everything.
Really? Did you have any training in realism?
Well, yeah, while I was at the academy, I drew a little bit and I tried painting. When you're young, that's what you do. You don't start off doing abstraction. So I was interested in the Renaissance. So I would try to copy Michelangelo drawings and try my hand at that. I was better at sculpture than painting. I couldn't understand painting at all. I tried it, but it was very difficult. Sculpture was more immediate, and I really loved it. But it really took me a while to figure out how to paint. Uh, I'm still figuring,
Yeah, we all are.
really. But that's what it was. I went to I did this giant painting of figures around the deathbed that was like just to see if there was any value in doing a painting like that. And it turned out to me that it seemed very exciting. So I began doing more of it to try to understand how to do it, really. And meanwhile, I got into PS1, where I had a studio for 2 years.
What is
And then,
PS1? I'm not familiar.
PS1, the Museum of Modern Art, it's in Queens. There is a place, it used to be a public school one. And a lot of
Oh,
high at a certain point, back in, I think, late 70s, took over the place. And they were squatters. And she was there with, Richard Serra was there. And there were all these really big artists, important artists who were there with her. James Turrell was there. And they transformed the place into a non-for-profit organization under the umbrella of the Institute for Art and Urban Resources. And they turned it into a studio space for artists, low rent studio space, and you had to apply. So I applied from Philly, and I got the studio, and I was there for 2 years. And when you're there, it's like a crash course in the New York art scene. The studios would be open every now and then, and people from all over the world would come walking through there. They had major exhibitions, like the Arte Povera exhibition and the Neo-Expressionist exhibition before Kiefer and all of those people became household names. And also the famous graffiti exhibit that Jean-Michel Basquiat, that was before I got there.
hmm.
But in the movie Basquiat that Schnabel made, there's a scene of the people sitting around talking during that exhibition at PS1. It was really kind of funny because I was at PS1, so I had a studio there.
No
And
way.
people would come in from all walks of life in the art world through the studios, and I met all these dealers and critics and uh, just some major figures, and everybody, a number of people expressed interest in showing my work, and
Hmm.
so I never really hawked my wares. I just went there. People said, "Oh, well, we want to show you," and I turned down a bunch, and I went with these two young guys, Jonathan O'Hara and Max Lang, and they had a gallery called Lang and O'Hara Gallery in Soho, and I had my first show there, and it
And
got
this
a
was
big.
in what year? Do you remember?
It was 87,
Okay.
87, and 87 or something. 88. Anyway, it got front page review in the Times with the photograph of.
What?
I know, it was like so bizarre. It was like when it happened, we were like, "What? I can't believe this."
Wow. That's kind of amazing.
Yeah, so it was like this overnight thing, and then Peter Ludwig, he was like one of the top two collectors in the world. Ludwig Museum in Germany, and he has one in Aachen and one in Cologne. He's dead now, but he purchased a lot of pictures from the show, and then from there, it's just waiting list for paintings at that time. Now there's no waiting list for paintings, but back then the waiting list for paintings, and
What do you think's
that
different about today? I mean,
uh,
you're
so different today. It couldn't be more different than today. You know, back then, there's whether we're telling ourselves a lie or not, there was a sense of an idealistic streak to making art. Uh, I didn't want to show, and I would not show in certain galleries because I thought they were, kind of vanity galleries. And
mm-hmm.
then uh, I would get like a phone call from American Artist magazine, and they
Mm-hmm.
say, the editor, he would say, "We'd like to do a cover story of you." And I said, "No, thanks." And he went, "What?" And I said, "I don't want to be I don't want to really be in your magazine because I think your magazine is like guns and chicks for artists. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so I would like turn these things down, or people wanted to include me in a book of like eventually it was sort of atelier style, painting, and I would say no, thank you. That's not all what I'm interested in or involved with. There was a sense of idealism. There were places, there were non-for-profit organizations, the Drawing Center, places like that where you you were unaffiliated with the commercial gallery, and people loved to do that. There was also the beginning of you remember the East Village scene? Do
No,
you know?
I'm not that familiar with the New York art scene.
Oh, well, what
I grew up
happened?
in upstate New York, but I didn't know anything about art when I was a kid.
Oh, how old are you now?
I'm 50.
You're 20 years younger than me.
I
How
know.
dare you? How
Yeah, it's
dare you?
nice to talk to you because you're so like you're
Old.
still so no, you seem so young and vibrant and like still going strong. And I'm like, yeah, I've still got a lot of time. This is great. Because
The
you look
days
like you
are,
could paint for another 30, 40 years.
I want to. I
Yeah,
want
I
to.
hope you do.
I hope so. It's it's great. I don't know. I always wanted from the time I was 12. I really just wanted to be famous artist,
Mm-hmm.
not because I wanted to make a lot of money, or maybe because I wanted I don't know, girls to be interested in me when I was a kid. Not now. When I was a kid,
Yeah.
and but I think that once things started happening like that, it was all very heady. And then at a certain point, I just lost faith in the whole thing. That I realized that I'm no better off that I'm well known. Uh, but it is good that I could help other people, like
Yeah.
teach. I've been teaching for like 30 years. And also my son, my first son had a stroke following surgery, a kind of mishap at New York Hospital, and he became
Wait, how
multiply.
old was he?
He was 3 when it happened.
He had why did he have surgery at 3?
Oh, he was born with hydrocephalus. Actually, just if you want to know the ins and outs of the story to some extent, there was a big article in the New York Times Magazine back in '95, I think,
Okay.
and it is with pictures and basically it's about my paintings, but it describes the situation with Sam. But he was born with hydrocephalus, and he was an occipital encephalocele, which is a hole in the back of his brain, and part of his brain had the brain was just reduced to a thin rim of brain. The whole center cystic space was filled with fluid, cerebral spinal fluid.
Really?
Yeah, so he was given less than 2% chance of developing normally, but he beat all the odds. He was like the miracle kid, and he had a seizure disorder, and a couple of things were off a little bit, but he was, making his. That's not my painting.
Oh, it's not.
No, that's an AI, and go
Oh,
back.
that stupid
That's not,
AI.
that
I
one
hate AI. All right, let me fix this real quick.
has all these artists and AI versions of their work, and then they have a bunch of paintings by me, and it's so like stupid. If you,
Oh,
it's
wait, let's oh, that's so irritating. Did you notice any others that weren't yours? It's funny because when I saw that one, I thought that doesn't look like his work. But frankly, there's not a lot of stuff on Google that I can copy. So I was really kind of getting desperate to grab stuff.
I know. Don't worry about it.
But no, I'm taking it off for now because that's just lame. Hold on one second. Give me a second here.
It's really funny to talk about it because it's someone decided that he or she would list all the salient features of my work, feed it into AI, and then have this thing produced. And you know, I don't know, spooky lighting, scary kids, sleeping figures, animals, I don't know, figure spaghetti or something, whatever. And then they would, then they generated it, and it's just awful. But it's,
Well, I was going to ask you about that painting because it's so different than your other work. I was like, oh, I was going to ask you about that.
they pop up. I mean, there are a number of them on that site. But then I've seen other things. There's some Chinese company was doing oil painting copies of my work.
Oh
And
gosh, it's so irritating. Well, if you see another one in a slideshow that's not yours, I'm pretty sure the other ones are all yours because that's the only one that I wasn't. I was like, well, this one's different.
no, that's not
So,
my
okay.
God. Oh, it's horrible.
That's so funny. It's such a funny coincidence because we had already talked about AI.
That's good. I'm so glad it came up.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, where were we when we noticed that ridiculous
Um,
mistake I made?
I was going through like.
Oh,
the
your
history-
son. We were talking about your son.
Oh, yeah, my son.
So he was developing well, and then he had surgery.
And
Is
then-
that what happened?
Well, when he was born, they put a shunt in his head. It's a pump that pumps the spinal fluid out of the center of his brain and then in a tube that runs down his chest and empties into his peritoneum. And the only thing we had to watch out for was to see if that shunt were to malfunction. And it did one day. And he was lethargic and he was throwing up. So I brought him to the hospital. The shunt was not working. They had to reposition the shunt. So they did it and were not satisfied so much with the surgery, but so he had to be watched very carefully during the night. And at one point during the night, I was in the room with him. At one point during the night, a nurse came in and did a neurological check by looking in his eyes with a flashlight to see if his pupils were responsive to light, equally responsive to light, and they weren't. That was like the red flag. There was intracranial pressure building up. She wrote it down in the nurse's notes and then disappeared. Didn't tell anyone. So
geez.
hours passed. By the time in the morning, I heard a little croaking sound, and I went over to his bed. He was totally blue. And I called the nurses, and they called the code. And I was pulled aside, and would you like to speak to a minister or a priest? And I said, why? I didn't know what was going on. Really. I knew something bad was happening, but I didn't know the extent of it. But apparently from that moment, he herniated, which means the brain pressure pushed through the foramen magnum at the back of the skull and blocked the blood flow to his brain.
No.
Yeah. So he stroked out large parts of his brain. And then for about a year, he was, about half a year, he was in the hospital. And then he was moved from the hospital to a place called Blythedale Children's Hospital. And there he couldn't speak at first. He couldn't move at first. He began to speak a little bit and move a little bit.
He's 3 years old now, though, right?
He was 3. He was 3, 4. He was turning 3. Now he was 4.
The fact that he even spoke before the surgery is kind of remarkable.
Yeah. Well, he before the surgery, he was doing okay. The last thing he said to me was "hold you." He wanted me to hold him, and then I put him down to sleep. And next, he didn't speak for another 6 months, and then he finally spoke. His first words were "agua" because he was bilingual. His babysitter was Spanish, so he spoke Spanish and English. And he went "agua," and then he said "mama," and then all of a sudden he started talking.
No kidding.
But then he had to go to Blythedale for over a year. He was an inpatient there doing all the therapies. And then then they said, well, time to take him home. And we went, what? Because he had
my gosh.
a seizure disorder that was life-threatening. So he required 24-hour nursing. So we had to do all this stuff and juggle all these things. And we had insurance first, but then we were encouraged to sue the hospital by the neurosurgeon who performed the operation, because he read the notes and said, there's a note in there saying that he was in crisis and nobody did anything. So we had a lawsuit against New York Hospital, and Sam won big time. And now he's got enough money to sustain him for the rest of his life. But he's about 40 now, 39. Um, he's lived at home. We have had 24-hour nursing for him all his life. But I also had 3 other children, well, 2 other biological children, Ian and Oscar and Ian. And then we adopted a little girl from China, Lily, who is like, I mean, they're all beautiful, but she's like the light of my life.
That's
And now
amazing.
she just graduated from Bryn Mawr, and she's a chemistry student. She does food chemistry right now. So,
Wow. What a story. How did you cope with that? I have a son who had seizure disorder. I think he's grown out of it now. He's 18 now and he hasn't had a seizure in 4 years.
oh,
But
great.
but that's so minor compared to what you went through. And I remember when he had his first seizure at 1.5 years, I couldn't park close enough to the hospital. So I'm running. I mean, I'm carrying him having seizures in my lap as I'm driving to the hospital while he's seizing. And then he's only 1.5 years old. And then there was no place to park near the hospital. So I parked 1.5 blocks away and I'm running with this seizing child to the emergency room. I didn't know what seizure, I didn't know if he was dying. I'm just a young parent, you know?
Yes, of course.
And I can't even imagine what you went through because that's nothing compared to what you went through.
Well, you go through it, you do it. It's just like what are your options are. You either tread water forever, or you drown, or you thrive. And I said to my wife at the time, who was Gail, we're going to thrive. We're going to have another kid. We're going to make sure Sammy does as well as he possibly could do. And we're going to use I'm going to use all of this as more information for my paintings, know? And the love I have and care I have for him, I'm going to put that care into my paintings and that love. And it was at that moment that I stopped doing, I used to, when I was at PS1 and afterwards, I was on a kind of postmodern, snide guy, smart person,
Hip and
painting
cool. Yeah.
cool paintings of, strange subjects that were esoteric. And though I still do stuff like that, I really realized that there was something much more important in painting. And instead of banging out these paintings, I started taking more time with them. I started thinking more about the technique and then the history of those techniques, why they were done, why I was gravitating toward those techniques and not other techniques. It opened, I started saying, why am I using perspective? So I had to revisit the origins of perspective in an original way, in a way that wasn't just what you read in the textbooks. And I did a lot of research, a lot of reading about Neoplatonism and perspective. And I don't know. And then I think that's when I really started the really intense theoretical study. I started reading all the French guys, Léotard and Baudrillard and Foucault, and tried to get through some Derrida, and I just tried to understand why the hell we were in the situation we were in art. Something definitely had come to an end. And it was not that art had come to an end. It was not that history had come to an end. It was that a certain, in the game of tennis, for example, the match had ended, but the game was still going on. And so I wanted to start thinking about laying the groundwork for a future of painting. It's not necessarily representational, it's anything, it's painting. I mean, my favorite painter is Willem de Kooning, who's abstract. So I see it all as one thing, but the seriousness of it, the fact that it's done without being snide or cynical, instead, that uses irony, but not as a cynical ploy, like you see in Jeff Koons and late Damien Hirst, things like that. Even John Curran, there's that level.
I'm not familiar with John Curran.
Well, there's a level of, I think maybe your viewers will, there's a level of cynicism in all that stuff that and fun and games and everything's happy and everything's a joke, and the art, and the more of a joke it becomes, the more it becomes sort of commodified, and at the same time it becomes entertainment, really, and decoration. And I didn't want my paintings to be decorative, and I didn't want them to be snide. I wanted to, and that was one of the big things, big troubles within early postmodernism, is that all authenticity had dried up, that there was no room for any kind of authentic uh, uh, position within art. And the fact that Sam had undergone such incredible trauma, and that we had to deal with this trauma, made me realize that there was a great deal of urgency to certain situations in life. And just because one is privileged to be able to sit back and say, well, we've done that, and it's all done, and let's just have fun. And it started reminding me of those guys in the Weimar Republic, those intellectuals smoking black cigarettes, bemoaning the fact that the world was going to hell in the handbasket, and let's just cabaret it up, and meanwhile the world is being taken over by fascists. So I just figured, I'm not going to play that game anymore. I just don't want to. I want to, and at that point, I stopped caring less and less about the viewer, and more about my own sort of development artistically. And my gallery in Soho folded, and so Marlborough approached me, and
Jeez, Marlborough approached you?
yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's hardcore.
It's no mystery. These big galleries approach you when your sales are up.
I know, but still, that's like one of the top 5 galleries in the world, right?
It was, but it was frankly the last place on earth I really wanted to show ever. From the time I was in high school to
Why?
I thought they showed a lot of shit. A lot of shit. They did show
Yeah.
2 of my absolute favorite art. 3 of them they showed. They showed Francis Bacon, Antonio Lopez, and
He does. Antonio Lopez Garcia shows there too?
yeah. Well, not anymore, because last year the gallery closed its doors.
No way, it's gone?
Well, I have no gallery.
I didn't know that. Marlborough's been around since like early to mid 1900s, hasn't it?
No. 59, like 1959.
Oh,
But
well, that's mid. Yeah. Okay. So mid 1900s.
mid 1900s. I thought you meant 19th century. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They like Frank Lloyd was one of the architects of the modern art market.
But they showed Picasso too, right?
I don't know.
There was a time when I thought they did.
I think they might have shown, second. Their collection of works in this, that they have in storage is like phenomenal. I'm sure they've got Picasso's out the wazoo and Bacon's. They have even a full cast of the Burghers of Calais in there. So they had. I mean, their holdings were enormous, but they showed stuff that I didn't like. A lot of stuff I didn't like.
So why did you go with them? Other than I mean, it was probably obvious. It's an amazing. They have.
Oh no, I actually went with them, and I was very troubled by it. And I've had many conversations with Pierre Lebet, who was trying to convince me to join the gallery. And finally, at one point, he said, "Listen, I am not a crook." But Marlborough had a reputation for being a little shady in certain areas back in the day, especially with Mark Rothko. But because the condition with Sam, I didn't have a gallery, and they offered to pay me a stipend in advance of painting sales, which was
that's hard to beat.
Saved my life. And so I had money every month, and I could paint. And that went on for years until finally they said, we're not going to do that anymore.
Oh, really?
So I was just selling, living off the sale of paintings.
Right. Yeah, but even if you have a stipend, you're still living off the sale of paintings, because they're going to take that off of the sales in the end, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so it turned out that the paintings stopped selling so well, and so my debt to them was building up.
Gotcha.
So stopped, and now anything they sell was going to be to repay themselves for the debt. Once that was over, I made sure that was done. And then after that, I just went on.
I had a gallery, nothing like this gallery. I mean, just a middle of the road at best gallery. Give me a stipend way back in the beginning when I was right out of college. They paid me a salary to paint. Same situation.
Great.
But they believed somehow in their twisted minds that because they bought the paintings in advance, that they owned the paintings to the degree that they could cut the paintings up.
What?
Yes. There was a painting that I sent them that it was too big, quote, to sell. It was like 7 feet by 6 feet, maybe. And it was a figure with some abstract elements in it. And they cut off half the painting. They cut off all the abstract side of it so they could just sell the figure. I couldn't believe it. They literally cut my painting in half.
That is absolutely absurd.
Have you ever heard of such a thing?
The only time I've ever heard of it was when the Manet's second version of the Execution of Maximilian, after he died, his wife and son cut it up so that they could sell the pieces of it.
Yeah.
And Degas brought them back and put it back together.
Did he really? Yeah, I don't think anyone's doing that for me. I think the other half's in the garbage somewhere, but I don't know what happened to it, but that's crazy. Anyway, that's sort of a tangent, but so since Marlboro closed down, you're just a sole artist, no representation.
No representation at this point. I don't know what I'm going to do, really. I don't know if I really want a gallery.
Dude, I haven't had a gallery since 2007, and I love it. No, 2008.
The thing that I miss, I really want to, my whole thing was I want to show the work.
Yeah.
I almost didn't even care if it sold. I just wanted to be in the conversation. So I really want to show, I have a ton of new paintings that I was going to show at Marlboro before they closed. So I'm going to exhibit them somewhere. I don't know where. I'm still. Yeah.
Weren't you part of this figurative show that was, I think it was like in one of the Carolinas and then came up to New York last year? It was a multi-figure show.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, why the laugh?
I don't know. So the show was originally the Bo Bartlett Center.
Yes, that's what it was.
And 2 of my students curated it.
Okay.
So they asked me to be in the show. I like them. They're good people. And Bo and I go back to like 1979. We were both students at the Pennsylvania Academy. We both had a studio in the same building on Chestnut Street. We've had our ups and downs, Bo and I, but he's a good man, basically. And I love him. He's like my brother. We're very different. But I think we're the 2 big names that came out of the Pennsylvania Academy from the last century.
Mm-hmm.
Well, from the end of the last century.
Oh, I didn't realize he studied there as well.
Yeah, he was there too. And so I told him, Bo, yeah, I'll be in the show. So I was in the show, yeah.
Yeah. Did you actually see the show in person?
Yeah, it moved to the New York Academy. And so I saw it there, and I was in a panel that they did. But, a more interesting show was when I was in these 2 collectors who owned some of my work, who were wonderful. Dr. Blake and Dr. Purnell, both of them. Their collection was shown in Bilbao at the Guggenheim in Spain.
Wow, that's amazing.
They had a giant triptych of mine that was that we exhibited there, and the Guggenheim accepted it as a gift of. So that painting's in the Guggenheim, a giant figurative triptych of mine with soldiers in the center. Those kinds of shows were the shows that really, I got very excited about.
Do you just pinch yourself? I mean, to be in major museums like that, and to have been written up in New York Times, and it's just mind blowing. Marlboro Gallery.
Yeah, it's all It's all an illusion. The only thing that's not an illusion is love. The only thing that makes me happy is love. But it's also when a painting's going well and I feel love for it, I
Right.
feel really, really happy. The other stuff is like, to say the truth, there are times when I'm so down that I have to pick myself up, and I'll say, "Well, look, I haven't wasted my life. I've painted all my life, and I talk myself into, it's not so bad. I've done some things. I can help people. I can, I can still teach. I can teach, uh, but
Wow. So you get down. You get down on your work?
yeah, definitely.
So do I. I
Oh,
mean, the fact that you get down, it kind of blows my mind.
oh, come on. It's my stuff. You know, ah, sometimes I'm surprised when I look at something and it's not so bad.
Yeah,
That's
that's how I feel too.
how bad it is. Because most of the time I look at it and it's like a bad dream. And then I say, to myself,
Yeah.
did I make the right move? I mean, I made that absolute decision to break with a certain trajectory, and did I do the right thing? And then I think in the end, it doesn't matter. I did what a human being, with a certain degree of historical inheritance, was able to muster in troubled times. It was the best I could do, and at least it's a record of one man's sort of, journey through the quagmire of postmodernism. Uh,
Yeah. So these are the kinds of things you tell yourself when you're down, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I try to talk myself up, but usually it never goes away until I pick up the brush and start painting again.
Yeah.
Uh,
You know what I find helps me? Doing smaller, just small, insignificant works where, because the big stuff, by the time I'm done with it, I remember, well, let me put it this way. I remember the last big painting I did. The, I have apprentices here. So I have 10 apprentices. So they're always with me. It's like my family and they're always watching. And I remember the last day of this painting, I'd been working on it on and off for a year. I put down the final few strokes. I stand back and I was like, well, I don't know what else to do. I guess I'm done. It'd been a year. And I'm like, I guess I'm done. Well, I'm hungry. I guess I'll go to lunch. It's just so anticlimactic, because I've been living with it for so long. And that last period, it really doesn't change that much. So I'm living with an almost finished painting for the last month. So by the time I put those last two strokes down, it's so anticlimactic that I'm just like, well, I guess I'll go to lunch. Got another one done. Time to start a new one.
now, I know the feeling. To me, it's like when I do it, I have this sort of sinking feeling that I tried my best. Did I accomplish anything? And I have to get over feeling really depressed about it.
It's such a
But
love-hate relationship, seems like.
it really is. It's like people say, "Oh, you're so lucky you can paint." I was like, I would punch a clock before I encourage anyone to, say, what am I doing? I'm an adult. I'm a human being, adult. I mean, here I am putting color on a canvas, and I don't care if it sells or not. I'm just, what am I doing?
It's
So
kind of insanity, isn't it?
it's definitely a saying, and you have to have a screw loose. In order to keep doing it, you have to have that screw loose that tells you keep doing it, even though it's like counterintuitive to do it. It's counterintuitive.
What
Uh,
what I, what I'm hearing from you is something that I experience all the time. And correct me if I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, but it's like painting for me is kind of like eating. Well, maybe eating's not like this for you, but just follow the analogy. Like for me, if I'm have a busy day, I will avoid eating because it takes up time. I can keep working, right? But at some point, I just have to eat. And then once I'm into it, if it's a good meal, I'm enjoying it. But for the most part, it's a nuisance. And I find painting is kind of that way. It's like I can't live without it, but at the same time, I resent having to do it sometimes. But I
well,
can't live without it.
yes, I find just about everything else a nuisance except painting.
Yeah.
But my uncle told me something when I was a little boy, and I was like showing talent. for drawing and stuff. He said, you're going to be an artist, and it's not going to be easy because you're going to always feel beholden to your talent. In other words, even when you say, I don't want to do this anymore, you're going to say, I have to do it. I have to do it. And you do it. And it is like, to me, it's like breathing. If I don't do it for a long time, I go nuts. I'm not really fun to be with. I'm always complaining.
It's very strange.
It's
I'm speaking for myself, I'm not saying you're strange. Well, no, I am saying you're strange. I'm saying we're both strange.
Believe me, we are strange. Artists are different.
Yeah.
People. And look, I asked so many of my friends who are artists, were you dyslexic as a young person? And most of them say yes. That their brains are wired slightly differently, and it's more beholden to the activity of an artist than it is, or at least than it is to do other things. We're thinking outside of.
Yeah. Oh, I know. I got all kinds of mental issues. I did as a kid too. Nothing serious, but that's an interesting comment because I could definitely relate to that.
You think you're stupid because other people can grasp these sort of like A to B to C concepts, and you're sort of like going from A to G and then filling in the gaps. And all of those gaps when you're a kid make you feel stupid, but when you're older, you realize that you've been traversing all sorts of remarkable stuff.
I know, isn't that weird? And you realize, wait, I'm not an idiot. I'm just smart in a different way.
Exactly.
Yeah, when I was a kid, oh gosh, I felt like an idiot all the time. I don't think there was one exception in my entire life growing up. I was literally always the last one finished with tests in school. And then when I took the ACTs, this was like the moment where I realized what my problem was. When I was taking the SATs, I got through the science, and let me think, it would have been, I got through the science and math. Those are things I'm interested in, right? Because I love engineering and those kind of building things. So I'm like, the science and math, that's my thing. But then once I got to probably what's a strength for you was the writing and reading comprehension part, I was bored because the subject matter was boring. So I immediately I noticed some guy kicking a soccer ball around outside the window. And then an hour and a half later, the buzzer went off and I realized I'd been staring at that dude with the soccer ball for an hour and a half daydreaming. And the entire second half of the ACTs, I was in another world.
Excellent. I love it.
And that's the way I was with everything. I had a waiter job and my boss said, Jeff, can you please quit because you are the worst waiter? Because one time I took an order of 8 people, and then I found myself in the kitchen and I didn't know how I got there. And then I vaguely remembered seeing a table of 8 people, and I started putting it together, and I walked back out to the table and I said, I'm sorry, I don't remember a thing you guys said. And it was stuff like that. It was stuff like that that kept happening. And my boss is like, hey man, you're a nice kid. I don't want to fire you and ruin your job record, but can you quit? And I said, sure, I'll put in my 2 weeks notice. And he said, no, you can go home now. But then once I was self-employed, it was a whole nother world because I was interested in what I was doing.
Yep.
And I started seeing myself excel in all these areas, but I felt like a moron my entire life growing up.
I did too. I really, really did. And it's by the skin of my teeth that I was able to eke out good enough grades to get into Haverford. But I hated school all my life until I went to the Pennsylvania Academy. And when I was there for 4 years, that was the happiest, educational experience of my life. I just could not wait to get there. But finally, after all those years, I was doing, like you said, exactly what I wanted to do in my own terms. And then everything blossomed,
You're different than me, though. I'm noticing a strength in you. I've noticed this in a few other artists I've interviewed that I don't have. And it doesn't matter. I'm still an idiot in this, and I'll always be an idiot in this area.
No,
No, it's okay because I'm confident in who I am. But I have I can't retain information, and you are an encyclopedia of information. I mean, what you know about art history and this, I envy people like that like yourself, that can retain information. That's my weakness. I'm a good
Well,
problem solver, but I cannot retain information.
it's
Save my
more,
life.
it's more important to solve problems, but it is also important to hold things in your head,
Yeah.
and so you can turn them around. And I think it's just a physiological or psychological, cognitive kind of, mistake or something that I have, that my memory is, it's not, although I could always remember where things were on a page. Don't really have a photographic memory, but I have an auditory memory.
Yeah.
So I have things in my head like, things I've learned a long time ago. One that April with his shore suit the drucht of March had perced on the road and baden every vein in Swishly cool, of which was true engendered. And that's Chaucer in Middle English. Or then
That
he
was some kind of English?
that was Middle English.
I
Yeah,
thought you were
before
speaking Italian for a minute there.
no. It says when April with its sweet showers, it goes on.
Wow. Yeah, that's an odd thing to remember. That is a good memory right there.
Also, light thickens and the crow makes wing to the rookie wood. Good things of day begin to droop and drowse one night's black agents. Or look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's playing Superman. Yes, it's Superman's range vision from the planet. Powers and very far. Or the owl and the pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea green boat. They took some home. Or the
Oh,
night.
you're so lucky, man. I envy that memory. I
This
can't
one,
do it.
the night.
I'm grateful for my problem solving abilities, because I compensate for my idiocy on the other side, at least. But
Those are the important. That's the important thing. This is just a fluke of nature that I have this insane memory for these words, but the most important thing is solving the problems. That's the issue with like the internet. People think, well, all the information is there. It's all there at my disposal, but it's not the information that makes the thought. It's the critical thinking that puts the pieces of the information of problems. And solving problems is the issue. The material is important in that it helps you to solve the problems, right?
Well, I will say this: if you're going to be a guy like me, this is the century to be me, because I have a phone in my pocket. So I don't need a memory as much as I would have 200 years ago. I can just Google it.
It's so great because back when I was studying art history, there was no internet. And so if you were researching, you'd be pouring through books after books, and the library, opening pages with note cards with all the notes on it, stuff like that. Now I just sort of like cross-reference something on Google or some other stores, JSTOR, the journals, and it's so easy now.
I know, it's great. Yeah, it's a good time to be alive in that area. Well, okay, this has been amazing. We're into an hour and a half. We haven't even looked at your art yet, except for that terrible blunder where I put on some AI, but
I'm glad you did.
Are you? Yeah, it was actually kind of a funny coincidence. But I actually, when I was fixing that, I got rid of your website on accident. So let me pull up your website real quick. Okay, so what's best? What would you prefer me to look at? Your website or your Instagram?
I don't know. Either one.
Let's start with your website then. Looks a little more formal here.
Although the new paintings are, there you go.
Yep. All right. So let's see. Selected paintings. So I'm going to have a lot of technical questions because I can't get my head around it. All right. Let's take this painting, for example.
Okay.
How could you not have used reference for this? I don't understand. How is that even possible? You must have had reference.
I had reference for the standing woman. That woman. These are all actually my son's nurses. So I used her. She's a very striking looking lady.
Yeah, she's great face.
Very, and so I had her.
The rest are imagined?
And that woman crouching, I had her. The two figures in the center are pretty much out of my head.
What?
The guy's face is completely out of my head. Yeah, they're out of my head.
That face is out of your head? Well, I moved. I don't understand how it's, oh, okay. I'm going to take a minute to get used to your website here. What in the world?
It's a different, a modern head based in some way in my mind on the smiling figure in Los Borrachos by Velázquez.
That's what it reminded me of. I totally was thinking that.
Well, I wanted to do. I mean, I've loved that painting my whole life, and I kind of wanted to do something that made me feel like that painting. And so, and then the subject evolved into lunatics leaving the asylum and forcing this one guy to dress as a bride. So there's a bridal gown on the floor, and it's just
I don't understand it. So do you study anatomy a lot? I mean, how do you manage the light logic? It's so complex.
Well, yeah, you do it enough, you sort of think of it, and you think of what objects look like in space. I mean, if I'm the knee and leg of that guy, I
Which
might
guy?
have.
This guy or this
Oh,
guy?
that guy. Yeah, that's the hard one. I probably looked at my own knee in the mirror and sort of said, "Oh, I see how it works." But in order to paint it, I have to take my eyes away from the mirror, so I have to memorize to a certain extent what's going on.
Right, right.
A split second. And I can't keep my knee in that position when I'm painting. So I memorize things, or I'll take a photograph of my knee or something like that. But really, all of those things are easy to find, enough of a reference to help you with it. But the thing is, I've never had those people outside.
So you're Frankensteining. So you have something, your own knee, maybe a snapshot of a knee, but then you're Frankensteining it all together.
Yeah, it's like Frankenstein. It's like they were never out there. The light was never on them. I had to kind of, intuit the light by and large. Like the thing that gave me the most trouble of all was once I established a foreground back there, that the color of the sky really, really bothered me because it was night, but it needed to be slightly lighter than dark so that every now and then a piece of a silhouette of one of those figures could be a slightly darker than the sky so that they would stand in front of it, and but coming up with the exact color, and finally it became that reddish color that you have when you're near a city. You know how the city makes the sky reddish like that? Because when I started it was blue.
How did you know? It makes perfect sense now that you explain it, but I never would have thought to make that you would have to silhouette a figure in front of a night sky, but it does make sense. Of course, there's still light in a night sky.
Yeah. And in order to create the spatial configuration, which is basically everything in my head that is governing the picture is space. This figure in front of that, this element in front of that, a greater texture and greater contrast in the foreground. And as you go to the background, it's less contrast, less saturation. All of the technical things occupy because I don't dwell on the subject. Like if the subject is there, I'll say, okay, that's the subject. Now let me solve every problem in order to paint this. But a lot of the problems are not just how do you make it look this way. The biggest problem is why do you want it to look this way, in 2020, 25.
Well, why do you want it to look? So here's how it looks to me. It looks like a big old truck with their bright beams on is pulling up to them or something.
Yep, that's right. That's
so what it is. Why was that your decision?
The decision really is to imbue a painting with genuine feeling and to make it genuinely enigmatic. And to make it use a manner of depiction that is anathema to modernism and to the art world right now. And all of those things to make something that everyone has learned to hate and to figure is over with, but to do it in such a way that it is absolutely right now the present tense of existence is there in the picture, and it sort of transcends its stylistic, whatever stylistic problems people might have with it, they disappear because it's a work of art. It's art. It means something. It's potent now. All of that potency is there at the same time as I feel like I've painted an enigma as clearly as possible. That's what I want to paint an enigma very clearly. And then see what happens. See what it means afterwards. I don't know. My big question will be, what does this mean in the whole history of painting? That's more of a question for me. What does it mean to do something like that at this particular time?
I was at a show at Springville Art Museum here in Utah. It was they have a spring salon every year. And I was sort of taken back by the quantity of art that was in there. And it made me realize that there is so much art being made. And I asked myself, why would anyone remember mine? Because there's so many people and so many paintings. I mean, if we could somehow take all the paintings being made in a given year and put them in a room, I mean, how big would that room have to be in order to house it, right? So when I'm like, is it even possible in the world we live in today to leave a painting behind that's noticed in that huge mass of work?
I think it is. You know how you go into a room and you meet all these different people, and then there's one person in the room that's speaking to you, and there's a clarity to the speech, and you feel a kind of automatic kinship, but at the same time you don't feel threatened. You feel trust. You feel that empathically can be understood or felt is there. And all of a sudden that person is the person you take with you, and what that person said you take with you when you leave the party, and the rest of the people are just people. So what is that person doing in order to what natural talents does that person have to actually capture your attention and to keep it? And I think that is a question. It's more of an empathic question, that the painting is really, like, for me, an empathic bridge, that the painter is the toll keeper on the bridge, and that you're invited to cross over the bridge. But the nature of the empathy, the trust that you might have for that offering is calculated by the artist.
Mm-hmm.
Not just, this is what I feel and it's all about me. It's a total artifice constructed to create a bridge that is like enticing the viewer to cross over.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that regard, I see it then as being, if a person is naturally, hail fellow, well met and very gregarious and easygoing and stuff like that, you fall in love in a certain sense. Man or woman, you have a kind of sense of love in your heart for the person.
Right.
A painting is like that. If you make the painting so that it will induce or evoke that love, I mean, really that love in every possible way. For example, in a painting like this, to make this painting and make it look as if it just happened. If you could see the struggle that I went through to make this painting come into being, it was horrible. It was a nightmare.
I wondered.
Made it by the skin of my teeth. But I made it by the skin of my teeth because I wanted it to have all of those things in it. I wanted it to be alluring. I wanted it to be curious. I wanted it to be kind of frightening. I wanted it to be like totally satisfying spatially. I wanted it to have sort of like have familiar references to things that we know about our history and paintings in the past. I wanted to have a kind of cinematographic sense to it, so that it was in keeping with more these times we live in, all of these things are artifices. there are considerations in the making of the picture to make it so that it will have the effect that I want it to have when a person sees it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That there's like a pure suspension of disbelief. Nothing about it except the fact that it's representational at a time when, well, now, I mean, when I was started painting representation, I mean, nobody wanted to do it. Mark Tansey did it, Eric Fisher did it, a couple of people did it, but a total suspension of disbelief. To you, what the hell is this? Why? And then the question, why the hell would anyone do that? It's especially with that big painting of all the books that I did.
That was a huge inspiration, that painting. Let's pull that one up. I had a couple questions about this one too, but maybe I can. Yeah. Oh, I wish it was bigger. Let's see. I can blow that up a little bit.
You hit Command. Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to struggle here today. Hold on. Let's try one more time. There it is. Okay. Yeah. What was the inspiration behind this? I remember when I saw this thinking, what crazy chaos is this? But it's so beautiful. It's so interesting to look at.
Well, it took 10 years to paint it.
Really not straight through. You're obviously doing other work, right?
Yeah. I started it, and then I said, I have no idea how to do this painting. So it's hung on my wall for 8 years. And then I did a bunch of other stuff and shows and stuff. And then I said, I got sick. Actually, I had cancer. I had cancer twice.
Twice?
Both once, yes. It's been a tough road, but I come up.
What kind of cancer did you have? I had cancer too. I had testicular cancer.
I've known a number of people who have had that. I had nasal pharyngeal cancer. Nobody knows how I got it. Nobody knows why I got it, but I got it. And so it's actually a cancer that they can get rid of. But if you get rid of it, it's so aggressive that they have to treat it very aggressively. So it was like chemotherapy and radiation. And so I was, completely spent. And then when I finally, after months and months and months, felt better, I said, God damn it, I'm going to do this painting. And so I did the painting in 2 years of solid work every day, listening to Philip Glass and Verdi's Requiem compulsively every day.
How big is it?
It's 10 feet by whatever that would be, 10 feet by...
Maybe 10 by 12 or something? Or 10 wide or 10 tall?
10 tall.
So 13. Like 10 by 12? Oh my gosh. So don't tell me you did this out of your head.
How else was I going to do it?
Come on, I can't even get my head around it. Well, you could get up on a ladder and actually look down at all these books.
No, I didn't ever do that.
What?
I knew what I wanted it to look like. And so I figured the biggest problem I'm going to have is what do books look like on the floor? What do they really look like? Not when you paint them out of your head, but what do they look like? And what are the features of books illuminated that way on the floor? What do books do? Well, sometimes one page is flipped up. Sometimes the edges are particularly white. Sometimes there's a reflection of light on the curve of the page. So you take note of all of those things, and then you can wind up putting them wherever the hell you want, and then put whatever images you want in those books. So those books are pretty much made up except for a couple of them. You know what I mean?
Well, what about the tabletop and all the fabric and food and everything?
That's out of my head. That's all out of my head.
Oh my gosh, I don't understand how that's possible.
It's just the way it looks. You remember the way it looks.
You remember the way it looks.
The thing that is there's an overall structure into which the details fall, which makes it easier to memorize them. And that overall structure is the nature of the light on a curve, the nature of the light across a plane, the nature of the light as you move from the side where the light source is to the side where the shadow is. All of those things, you have in your head. And those are very simple ideas. And then once you have those ideas, any object you place within that sort of conceptual framework, will have to conform to the idea, the program of illumination, that you set up for yourself. So to make it look from right to left one way, from front to back another way, from corner to corner another way, all these things are modulations of light and temperature as you move through it. Once you have that kind of clear in your head, I mean, it's still a shitload of work, but it's those things fall into place. And then you just keep working them until they generate a reality effect for you, And once
So
they
is there
do,
is there a fair amount of painting and repainting as you're searching for that realism?
yes, until I figure out how to do a certain thing, like the last thing I did that was the second to the last thing I did was the front of the table, that disheveled tablecloth.
Yeah.
That was much more systematic and neat looking before, and then I said, no, it's not going to work. So I messed it all up. I just messed it up, and that was all out of my head, messing it up that way. But the other thing was that when a guy came in to photograph it for the gallery, he showed me the photographs, and I went, oh my God, that's not the painting. And so he left, and I went over the entire floor area that was peeking out between the books, and I just gnarled it up. I made it look like pieces of paper crumbled and spots and things like that in it to give it an even greater, complexity.
Yeah, I was looking at that because that's a detail that is pretty sophisticated.
I've been doing Jeff's online mentorship program for about a year now, and it is awesome. Everything is online, super streamlined. If you can be there, you have the ability to talk to him once a week and he can review your work and help you. If you can't be there, it's pre-recorded. You can go back and even re-watch things if you missed something during class or couldn't be there. So the online portion of it is almost better than real life because you can always go back to it, which is awesome. The demos are recorded. It's just like all available whenever you need it. And I'm a stay-at-home mom of 4 and my time is limited and it's also very interrupted. And so to be able to go back has been clutch for me. And you get to work with Jeff HEIN, who's awesome. He's tough. The assignments are simple, but difficult, and they're difficult to make us all better. And he's able to give us these assignments, coach us through it, help us stay excited to progress. And so it's just been a great experience. I am so grateful that he has been willing to take time away from his own art to offer all of us to have it. So if you're thinking about doing it, it's amazing.
To learn more about how you could have me as a personal mentor, check out the link to HEINatelier.com in the show notes or video description. Maybe a lot of people might think that's a ridiculous statement, but in the years that I've been painting, those are the kind of details that I find I miss. The details that one wouldn't think of. Like what's the character of not even the secondary image, but it's like way down the line. Like no one's looking at the floor.
I know.
Yet, if you get the floor to look just right, it can make the whole painting sing.
That's exactly right. And that's true of everything.
Yeah.
It's like there are general things, and you get all those general things, but still it misses the point because it's not the general things have to be in place, but it is these nuanced moments inside of the thing that give it its life. And doing that actually is a model for a model for understanding things in life. Is that we live in a society now where things are black and white. We live in terms of tribes. You're either on the right or on the left, or you listen to news and you take away from it a sound bite. We world of emblems and signs and sound bites and glyphs and things like that. And we're becoming less and less capable of constructing the ligature, the things that connects those signs and those glyphs, the longer, more nuanced conversation. And so I think that it is always in the nuanced conversation between signs that the most important part of reason occurs, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So and that's a lesson you learn from painting. Painting teaches you that lesson, and it's a lesson applicable to things outside of painting, which is, you know, one of the reasons I love painting so much is that it helps me think. It helps my brain think. You know, when you're little and you say, "I don't want to study math, Mom. Why do I have to do this?" And they say to you, "I don't want to be a mathematician." They say, "It doesn't matter. It's good for your brain." They always say, well, guess what? Painting is just as good for your brain, but we don't know that. And we take the painting and art programs out of the schools and focus on STEM. And we're falling behind in every way. End of the empire.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And if there are art programs, they're just noodle necklaces and whatnot, not challenging the student really.
Exactly.
So, all right, this is good. I'm back here because I got a couple technical questions. That's the downside of being interviewed by a painter. So your process, it's clearly indirect. You're working in layers. How much of
which means that 98% of the painting is direct. Indirect painting, even in indirect painting, most of it is direct painting enhanced by indirect stuff.
Okay, you're gonna have to explain that one a little bit more. I'm not sure I understand.
Well, I mean, the paint's got to get onto the canvas to begin with somehow, and
right.
I can't just take an area and not do the rest of it. The whole thing has to be at a completed stage before I can even begin it to the next stage. Here's what I do: I'll do the painting a complete underpainting with the darks are not as dark as they're going to be. The lights are as even lighter than they're supposed to be when they're the brightest in the painting. Okay, so it goes from white to not quite dark, right? And there's suggestions of color throughout. So it's like
is it pretty low chroma at this point?
Yeah, at the beginning, it's the colors low chroma, but there is a clarity in the value distinction and a clarity in the temperature distinctions.
Okay.
The simple temperature distinction between the lights being very, very hierarchicalized, many of them, the shadows being much more similar to each other, right? And then the idea in your head that there is an overall chroma. In other words, if you're outside, the blue sky is the overall chroma. If you're in a room, generally there's a grayness that happens if you turn the lights off. And then you go into a red room, the chroma is red. What that means is that the shadows are going to be reflective of the overall chroma. Whatever overall chroma you choose. And in the beginning of the picture, it's not that you're starting with what the final chroma of the picture is going to be. But if you start with, say, raw umber or raw sienna, or a dark brown or something like that, then every time you go to the shadows, you're going to be indicating that color.
Right.
Shadows are all going to be reflective of that color.
And if you don't, let's say you start with, I'm just making sure I understand. Let's say you start with an umber underpainting that leans sort of warm.
Right.
And then if you were to go in and make the shadows cooler on that underpainting, it's going to stand out dramatically. So you're trying to key it to the general temperature so you don't have to deal with that down the road.
Yes, because first of all, the definition of a chalky picture is that there's coolness in the lights and coolness in the shadows. A similar character of coolness. That's the only thing that makes a chalky picture.
I'm so glad you said that. So many artists say using too much white, and I'm like, where in the crap
No,
did you get that from? That has nothing to do with white.
exactly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the Impressionists would all be chalky painters. They
And
use
what
so much.
else are you supposed to lighten things with? You want yellow paintings everywhere?
No, but you lighten things in the direction of the temperature of the light.
Right.
If the shining on things is cool, you can allow your white to be, unmixed or with little types of grays or blues in it, right? You can do that. That's very lightly. But if the light is warm, you put white, but then you've got to add to it the character of the warmth,
Right.
because white is always cold. You know that.
Right.
White is cold by itself. So when you start I start the underpainting. I let the whites be cool to begin with, all cool to begin with, and the shadows all neutral, not warm, neutral.
Do you use black?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yes, I do. Very later in my life, I mean, in the last, I guess 15 years, I've realized how important black is.
Same. Well, for me, it's only been like 2 years, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't start sooner.
I same way. It's like, why am I? But I would mix like blue, ultramarine blue with burnt umber, and I would get a black. But sometimes you need it to be pristine black. Sometimes an earth black, like Italian earth black, and then sometimes ivory black.
Yeah.
I rarely use cold black, except if I'm painting outside. If I need a sky or something of some sort.
What would be an example of a cold black?
It's called cold black.
Oh, that's what it's called. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
And it's just a very cool black, very cold. Ivory black is slightly warmer, and Italian earth black is even warmer than that. But they're all blondes. So having done the underpainting that way, it's like a chromatic grisaille. It follows a very logical idea that the shadows are going to be reflective of the chroma, and the lights are all going to be interruptions of that ability to reflect. And so I build the whole thing that way. I'm not trying to make it the color that it's ultimately going to be. I withhold that completely, and build the light. When the underpainting is from the whole damn thing is done on one layer, I will, when it's dry, I put, I don't always do this, but this is one method. I put a glaze over the entire thing with liquid, and it doesn't matter. The glaze is usually warm-ish, or not too hot, but warm. Okay.
Are you just basically using it to oil out?
No, I'm actually darkening the entire surface. I'm putting a transparency of a dark.
Oh, so you're mixing pigment into the liquid.
Yes, over.
Okay.
Right, and the whole thing, and then I let it dry, and then I paint it the whole thing again on top of it. But now that I'm painting on top of a layer of glaze, right, that's dry, the opacities are sitting on top of that glaze. So they seem to be floating. Mm-hmm. And then when I hit them with my thumb like this at the edges, the white that I'm putting on at this point is a warmish white. When I hit it with my thumbs like this, it becomes a true scumble, and it becomes iridescently blue or gray.
Oh.
And that's how with one skin you can move from warm to cool to. Now, at this point, the shadows.
So you don't even have to mix. You don't have to mix the cool in right before the Terminator edge. You just let the coolness of the translucency come through.
That's right. That is what a scumble is. It produces what's called an optical gray. And,
interesting.
That when I figured that out by accident one day, years before this, it was like a eureka moment. I realized that how the skin in Baroque paintings in Caravaggio, one skin moving from light to that, the edge of the light where it sort of starts to become cool and the turning, that is done so organically simply by thinning the paint over a dark surface.
No joke. Does it matter what color the glaze is underneath, or is it always going to go cooler?
It'll always go cooler, always, and it will always, and it just matters that it's darker underneath. You know, Leonardo did an experiment. He said, you take a black panel, right? And you put one after the other of, you know, micron thick layers of light over it. Let them dry. Next one, dry. Next one. You're going to end up with the blue of the sky. Now, he's thinking also about the sky without the sun shining at night is black. When the sun shines into our atmosphere, it reflects through all the water vapor in the air, producing a blue, a scumble. The sky's blue because of that, right? So when Leonardo was thinking about painting mountains in the distance and the Mona Lisa or in the Madonna of the Rocks, he's thinking atmospherically. And he's the actual act of scumbling and creating this optical gray is a pictorial imitation or a material imitation of the of atmosphere.
No joke.
Yeah. So just all that together, you know, but you see, that can work here and there, right? You're always going to have to augment it by mixture, because if it's all the same everywhere on every one of those figures, then they'll all be floating on the same plane. So they have to be slightly different. Some of those grays have to be darker. Some of them have to be greener than cooler. Some of them have to be pristine gray. Some of them have to be warmer gray. You know, so you have to modify it with direct painting. But the feeling you're after is that it's one skin moving from light into turning effortlessly. But then when you come to the shadow, right? Now you've got this warmish white light, thinned at the edges, optical gray in the turning, and now you're coming to the shadow, which always at this point looks like it just falls into a hole. So now you've got to paint over the shadow very thinly. In other words, there's an expression for it. It's called encapsulating the darks. So you encapsulate the dark with a color that is neutral, that neutralizes the warmth of it, so that by comparison to the warmth of the light, the neutral looks cool, but it doesn't look cold and it doesn't look hot, right? Now, there are different ways of doing that. That one is more Velasquez-ish, but there's a Rubens way of doing that where it's really hot in the shadows and hot in the lights as well, with a very distinctive gray turning, you know? You know, it's but the character of the light with its full opacity is so different than the character of the shadow with its, you know, sort of raging transparency that you believe it with all. You believe it. But
what I'm understanding, though, is that you're saying you won't want to leave it completely transparent.
Right.
Because then it will fall back and just sink in like a hole.
Right. Unless on the next layer of the picture, I pour a glaze over that shadow and even a little bit over the light, maybe, but then immediately we put the opacity back into the light. So you always have opacity in the lights, translucency in the turning, the look of transparency in the shadows.
Dude, you are brilliant. Like, okay, so here's the thing. Have you heard this from anyone else?
No, I mean, I've not put that way, but you know, if you read, for example, Max Stirner's book or Sir Charles Locke Eastlake, the idea of optical color, optical mixtures with scumble. Sir Charles Locke Eastlake talks a lot about that. It's a little archaic, his speech, and you have to really understand it through practice to really get it. And Max Stirner talks about you know, some of that stuff. But basically what you wind up figuring out is that there's a checkerboard effect in the optics of illumination. The absolute highlight is cool compared to the field upon which it sits, which is the light mass. Then the turning is cool again, and then the shadows are neutral. Shadows are neutral because if you have a cold light, a neutral shadow will look
the
warm.
core shadow.
Yeah, like, well, I never know these terms. What's the core shadow? I don't mean the turning. I mean
no, the darkest part of the shadow, because I mean, once you get into the reflected light, then the temperature could change.
Yeah, right. Imagine there's no reflected light
Okay.
in the shadow.
Okay.
There's
And then I get you. Yeah. Okay.
it's like a light mass, highlight, light mass, turning shadow. Okay. Each of those has is a difference in temperature. The highlight
Mm-hmm.
cool on the field of slightly warmth of the light mass. The turning in relation to that has a coolness to it of various sorts. And then the shadow actually, here's the thing, it's because the light is warm, it's going to want to look cool, but you don't want to necessarily mix blue into that or
Then it'll get chalky.
it could get clumsy. So
Yeah.
what you do is you use a neutral color, and that neutral color is against a warm light mass, the neutral will look cool. Against a cool light mass, the neutral will look warm. The same neutral, and
Mm-hmm.
you make it susceptible to any kind of reflected color that could fill into it, because there's also reflections and shadows beyond the of colors, depending on where the object is sitting and what the spectrum, the mirror light is, in the shadow.
This is, there are two things that you've touched on that I've not heard another artist talk about that I feel strongly about, and I feel like I kind of discovered on accident throughout the years of painting. And I think they're misnomers. So one is this statement that you hear all the time: your transparent, your lights are opaque, your transparent, or I'm sorry, your lights are opaque, your shadows are transparent. So what schools do, particularly ateliers today, many ateliers, is they teach the student to do completely opaque lights and completely transparent to where you almost see the canvas underneath darks. But what tends to happen is it's like you could stick your hand under the edge of the lights and just pull them right off. Like it's like two different surfaces. The darks are sitting back 10 inches from the lights. And it's weird illusion. So you need some opacity in the darks, just a little bit of opacity in the darks, so that it feels like an extension of the form.
Well, you think about it this way: if you leave it transparent and dry while you're working the light mass, right? The next step is to encapsulate the shadow.
Right. And then doesn't fall back so far.
Doesn't fall back far.
Yeah. But no one talks about that. That's why I'm so excited to hear you talk about this. And the other thing, what was the other thing? Oh, the chalkiness. It's was that it? No, there were two things now. I'm losing my train of thought. Oh, yeah. When your lights are cool, then your shadows are warm, right? Or if your lights are warm, then your shadows are cool. And I think people take that way too literally as well. So where they're making a warm skin with a blue shadow, and it just looks dead, like a corpse, right?
Exactly.
And
right.
I did this experiment once, and you'll find this interesting because you talked about this idea of neutral shadows. So I photographed one of my students with warm light and with cool light, but I turned all the lights off, I closed off all the windows, skylight, everything. It was as dark as I could get it in my studio. And I photographed them under warm and cool light. Then I took the two photographs and put it in Photoshop. Then I isolated the shadows on both of the photographs and put them next to each other off to the side. I cut them off, put them next to each other. I bet you could predict how they related to one another.
I would think, my guess is that the camera actually tried to compensate for the warmth of the light.
No, it didn't, because I had it with manual mode. So everything, including color, including white balance, was fixed. So, what happened was it was the exact same color. The shadows were just neutral. It was exactly the same color.
Oh yes, right.
But but the one against the warm skin looked bluer when against the warm skin, and the neutral against the cool skin looked warmer against the cool skin. But when you put them next to each other off to the side, it was the exact same shadow.
If you take a piece of paper under regular light, a white paper, and look at it, stare at it until you see the purple, you know how it is. You'll see little pieces of purple, little pieces of lime green.
Yeah.
Flickering together, and then if you if you focus on the purple of it, right, and then you take a square of yellow and place it on the paper will look flamingly purple.
Yeah, it's crazy.
A simultaneous contrast.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what we're talking about here, is that the warm light is forcing our eyes to see the coolness of the shadow, and then the cool light is forcing our eyes to see the warmth of the shadow because of the rods and cones wanting to see the shadow, right? But you're absolutely right. It's neutral, because a neutral color will look two different ways when you stick it next to another color by simultaneous contrast, right? So
right.
That again is a detail. Is one of these things, like we were talking about the floor of the painting of cocaine with, you don't pay attention to it, but by paying attention to it, it changes. A greater reality effect. That's it's a little thing, but without knowing that, it becomes an impediment to not know that, so that you can move more swiftly through the painting and paint out of your head.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, man. Yeah, that's really good information. I appreciate that. And I bet money that looking at your paintings in person, they're completely different because of what you're talking about with your exploitation of transparency and opacity in the correct proportions, because that can't be photographed.
No, it can't be photographed.
Isn't that frustrating as all get out when you try and photograph your work?
Yeah, in fact, in the beginning, the work looks better in the photographs, and then as you get more complicated with the technique, it looks less good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's true.
It does. It looks, and it's unfortunate. Indirect painting just doesn't come across well in photography. Your paintings still look amazing in photography, but I'm sure they look even better in person.
Well, the paint has a lot of density. I mean, there's a lot of variety in the density of the paint. You know? You see it. They have a weight to them.
All right. Well, I have kept you for an hour and 2 hours and 15 minutes. So I'm just going to look at one more painting so you don't hear all day. You
can talk as long as you want. I'm perfectly happy.
You're so kind. I appreciate that. I would like to, if it's okay, and I'm not pushing too hard here, I'd like to talk about one of the ones with your son, Sam. I'm assuming this is one.
Yes, that's right.
Is it just me, or the rest of you guys also get weirdly excited when you order new paint? Because I don't know about you, but when I get paint in the mail, it feels like Santa just dropped my Christmas presents off at my doorstep. With Vasari paint, my paint of choice and the podcast sponsor, it's even more exciting. And let me show you why. Because when Vasari shows up, it comes in this incredible box where each tube lays in this little compartment perfectly formed around the tube in this nice soft foam. And it's surrounded by velvet, red velvet. Now you got to ask yourself, if a paint comes so carefully protected and surrounded by red velvet, you got to wonder if this paint is worthy of royalty. It is. Vasari is. So if you haven't tried Vasari, you're seriously missing out. And the thing about Vasari, it's not only the best paint out there, it's also made by an incredible company that's been around for 30 years and knows its customer by name. Do yourself a favor, go to vasaricolors.com and order yourself some for your next painting. Tell me a little bit about this.
Okay, that painting is called Spiegel im Spiegel, Mirror in Mirror. It's actually the title of a musical piece by Avo Pärt. But what it represents is like the figure in the background, the mummified, mummy-looking figure in the background is Rudolf Sturzkogler, the Viennese actionist. And he, along with people like Hermann Nietzsche and others, there was a group called the Viennese Actionists, and they were a group of conceptual and performance artists that were working at a time where art had arrived at the great reduction of minimalism, and that all things that could be felt were suspicious. Authenticity was suspicious. Feeling itself was considered, almost anathema to the modern conception of what formalist development in painting was. So they produced these things that focused on suffering. Now, Schwarzkopf would actually cut himself and wrap himself in gauze as he was doing it,
Oh,
doing the performances, and eventually, I think, committed suicide. But the other person was the one who they call the Pope of Viennese actionism is Hermann Nietzsche, who did these performances where he would string up an animal and cut their body open. In fact, if you go to that one painting of the bicycle wheel with the two side panels, one was of a piano flying in the sky, and the other one is where is it? That one, right? It's right. You go on top of Dead White. See Dead White? They see the face. The
I don't
big
know
face.
titles. Yeah, the face. Okay.
Go up two.
Up to?
Yeah, that one right there.
All right.
Okay. This is the
Wow,
giant.
that's intense, dude.
That's the painting that's 40 feet long.
Holy moly.
That's right. So the panel where the figure is set up like that, the animals, that's the way Hermann Nietzsche would string up these animals, then cut them open and have the blood fall over a participant in the ritual.
Is it shaped? Is there any reference to the crucifixion, or is that just a coincidence?
No, it's. I think that Nietzsche does it as reference to a crucifixion, and in my painting, I'm referencing Nietzsche, but allowing it to also be crucifixion, I don't really care. Now that painting, that is done completely out of my head.
Come on.
That is utterly out of my head.
Dude, I can't understand your mind. I wish I had that kind of brilliance, man. Totally.
If you knew how simple it was, it would be seen, but then it becomes very complex after it starts being simple. It's all about the way I said, there's the overall.
But how do you even know what a chicken looks like strung up like that?
Well, first of all, it's not a chicken.
Oh, it's a pig? What is it?
Deer.
It's a what?
Deer. It's legs in the back. It's some kind of animal, pig, deer.
Well, it works, whatever it is. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's definitely getting across that disturbing quality.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, definitely. So, yeah, I just bring that up because, so Hermann Nietzsche, the character behind my son Sam in that painting is Rudolf Schwarzkopf.
Okay.
Now, so he is doing a performance that is highlighting suffering and the feeling of something. And Sam is actually in a state of, I did that painting, he had a double pneumonia. So I was trying to pit one form of suffering against another form of suffering, an artificial form against a non-artificial form, but then in the context of something that was totally artificial to begin with, is the painting. So it's just sort of an opportunity for thinking, an occasion for speculating about why these two things would be in the same. And remember, it's that my goal is to paint an enigma clearly. And that way I stay away from illustration. As it veers more in the direction of illustration of an idea, I change course until it has just the right, effect, because I don't want it to be a statement. I want it to be a question mark.
Oh.
Paintings are always questions to me. They're not statements of fact.
That's interesting.
Yeah, there are opportunities for speculation.
So when you finish a painting, is the question answered, or is it just you finished expressing the question and now you're on to the next question?
Exactly. I've expressed the question adequately.
Okay.
And that's when the picture is done. The pictures, if I sense a picture is veering too much in the direction of explaining or illustrating an idea, then in the course of it, I changed my path so that it doesn't go there.
I want to ask a more personal question. Yeah. Personal meaning my person. that I don't normally ask stuff like this, but I'm curious. What if, like, I illustrate the Bible? That's one of the things that I do. How would I make a painting that is a narrative of a story, right, in the Bible, and avoid, or how, I don't know how to ask this question. How can I make it a question instead of just simply another illustration of a Bible story? Is that even possible, or am I in a place where it's impossible to do?
It's absolutely possible. Now, if it's an illustration for somebody who wants you to illustrate a Bible.
No, this is a Life of Christ series I'm doing for a collection. Yeah.
Right. So that's pretty cool. Here's how I explain that. And it's something that I believe with all of my heart. When I first saw Andy Warhol's work, I was little and I saw it and I was thinking, man, this guy, he just hates everything. He's just a nihilist. He just, this is ridiculous. But how can he say that this is art? And then what is he doing? And it was only when I was older that I really got Warhol and that I consider he's one of my favorite artists.
Really?
Oh my God, yes.
Well, okay, finish your point. And then I want to know more about that, but go ahead.
Because Warhol is probably the greatest realist of the second half.
What?
Now, what is realism?
Okay.
Warhol, we look at those paintings and we think he wants us all to be this way. He thinks we're all this way. What he's saying is that this is what we are becoming. Be careful. We are becoming this. It's an admonishment. It's not, this is a guy who was going to church like 2 or 3 times a week with his mother. Catholic church, Catholic Polish guy, who is walking around in a kind of disguise in order for people to express this very banality that they could express so easily. He's letting them do it, not because he wants to insult them, but just as a warning that this very thing that looks like it's anathema to anything you believe is actually inspiring you to move against it. So in order to create a picture of suffering, you might want to make a picture that is full of gleeful happiness, over the top, so that it points to the fact that these people are not really happy. They just look like they're happy. So there's a Chinese artist who I had dinner with. I can't remember his name, but he does these big smiley faces. And in China, to make big paintings of smiling people, it's like nobody could say to you, you can't do that. I mean, nobody can say you can't do it. You're making smiling people. They look happy. This is great. Everyone's smiling. But the reality is that it's a fake smile. And anyone who knows that it's a fake smile. So he's able to do the very thing that's subversive without giving himself away at all. So making a person choose to follow Christ, as opposed to telling them that they have to follow Christ. Creating the situation where Christ is absolutely needed, where what Christ represents is actually the best remedy for it, without showing them the remedy, without showing them the effect of the remedy, without forcing them to.
Oh, that sounds really hard.
But that is painting and an illustration job. I mean, who would be an example? I mean, when you look at The Scream by Edvard Munch, this is an example. The Scream. How long do you think that we can dwell in the realm of that scream? Not long.
Not long at all. I could last maybe 10 seconds.
But what does it do? It pushes us away from the scream. It forces us to find comfort somewhere else.
Do you think that was his intention?
I think any artist who evokes a sense of the real is able to do it because of that. Yes, I do think that.
You have a very optimistic outlook on art.
That's why I know art's going to live forever.
Yeah. I have to admit, I'm a little more of a skeptic. I often think, I often lean toward there's less meaning and we're drawing meaning out that the artist may not have even intended. But I think your perspective is much more kind.
No, it's not. It's that I recognize that the artist's mind is every bit, the great artist's mind is every bit as profound as the greatest mind that ever lived. And
Oh,
so
I agree with that. I agree with that. Yeah.
I mean, if a person, and I wouldn't say that about everything. If a person is like doing Thomas Kincaid paintings, I would say, well, there's not much more to this than just, this cheesy illustration of a cheesy idea. But the more complex your work gets, the more.
But why the scream? So what is it about?
Well, the scream is just an example, but like
No, but what is it about that work specifically that you're able to draw so much respect and meaning out of it? Respect for the artist, and you're, out of it. What is it specifically about his work that makes you believe that he is, at that high level intellectually?
Oh God, I believe he is. I know that he was correspondent with August Strindberg and all the intellectual writers of his day, that he was not in isolation.
So, so a lot of your perspective on some of these artists comes from your reading as much as anything else, from what you know about their lives, who they hung with.
To some extent, that's sort of like an afterthought. I see it in the work itself.
You do?
Oh God, yes. I see it and look at all of his work. Look at the life he lived, the tuberculosis in his family, the horrors of the time. Plus, look at the times, when there was a sort of fat man complacency about being, a man in society. It was like around the Gilded Age, sort of, and afterwards slightly. I mean, look, if you look at it, Heinrich Ibsen's plays, and how people were. And characters like Hedda Gabler or in The Doll's House, how the women are treated and how they're there's a kind of like, you just want to scream. Basically,
Yeah.
in the end, you just want to scream. And life can be so unbearable that scream, if you've ever experienced that scream, and I have actually, when my son got sick, I experienced what that scream felt like. But there are all sorts of other opportunities to feel things, not just in the scream. But that's what I think. I think that if you can present something counterintuitive, then it forces a person to think of it in regard to their own choices to act intuitively. And so what did Christ say to Mary when his mother, he falls on the cross? He says, "You see, mother, how I make all things new." He makes all things new because he's acting in a purely counterintuitive way. What kind of intuition what would lead a man to allow himself to be tortured and crucified and accept it as his fate because of what he has to do? Everything he does is a counterintuitive measure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yet, and I think great artists are counterintuitive because our intuitions are socially determined, And so, in the age of Jacques-Louis David, for example, there are thousands of people who are doing exactly what the times require, and there are all these students of David doing David things, but they're not David. When Delacroix paints the way he's painting with eyes in the back of his head. That's not what modern art should look like. Modern art shouldn't look like Rubens and Veronese. It should look like David. It should look like Ang. It should look like neoclassical work. But no, he throws it in their face. What about Michelangelo during the Renaissance when he decides to, completely invert his total understanding of or his belief that the quest toward beauty is the quest toward God? What if things become ugly? Like The Last Judgment, that's one of the ugliest paintings ever done, but one of the most powerful paintings ever done. It's ugly, it's cacophonous, it's horrendous, and yet it's so fucking powerful.
It's brave to make an ugly painting for the sake of the message, I think.
Only if you're only thinking about selling paintings.
That's true.
If you don't care about whether or not they sell, you do what you want. If we liberate ourselves from the market, then we can be real painters.
Yeah, that's true.
I know it's idealistic, but I'll go
It's,
to my.
well, I think all of us, I think, well, maybe not all of us, I don't know. I am there 90%, but there's always going to be that 10% because you got to pay the bills, you know?
You can teach.
That's a good point.
I teach.
Where do
I
you teach, by the way?
teach at New York Academy.
Oh, you do? New York, did you say New York Academy?
Yeah.
Oh, you teach there too? No kidding, man. What a powerhouse group there.
The senior critic there. I'm one of the senior critics.
No kidding.
I was the senior critic. We invented the idea because I didn't want to be full-time faculty anymore.
Wow.
So
your teaching gives you the freedom to be able to just paint whatever the heck you want to paint and not have to worry about paying the bills.
Teaching and other jobs that I did, if I do teaching gigs other places or do lectures, or I do a workshop every year in Orvieto with my friend Bernardo Siciliano. And it's called and so we get students from all over the world coming for a couple of weeks in the summertime in Orvieto, and we teach every day and give lectures and things. So,
but you must still be selling some of these paintings.
Oh yeah, and then every now and then I'll sell a painting, of course.
Yeah, because they're incredible. I mean, I would kill to own one of your paintings.
Well, they might kill you before you.
Yeah, after I bought it, I'd starve to death. But
I do this, like the poor fellow who bought that big painting of the bicycle wheel.
Yeah, I mean, do you ever paint small? Is this huge or is this small?
That's 6 feet by 4 feet.
Holy crap, dude! That is a lot of face.
There are some little ones. Go back. I'll show you some little ones.
All right, yeah.
There's my little one. Oh Christ! Oh, the one of the baby, the premature baby.
Right here.
Yeah, that's a little one.
How big is it? Oh, it's little even here. Let's see if I can get it bigger here. How big is it?
It's about 15 inches, 16 inches.
Okay.
Long.
Well, dude, this has been so much fun, man. Seriously, one of my bucket list interviews. I'm such a crazy, creepy fan of yours.
I'm really honored that you are, and I hope that this was is useful to someone.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Well, you know what? I'm selfish. I do it for me, and it made my day, made my year. I got a lot to think about, but
if you want to do it again, I'm happy to do it again.
Well, you know what I'd like to do? There's a series I'm going to be starting soon where I get 2 or 3 artists, probably 3 artists, randomly on a day. Randomly meaning they don't know who the other 2 are, but it's among my guests. I've had about 120 guests, and we just talk about. I'll just present a question like, "What is art?" or "Why do we paint?" Or I would love to have you participate in that. I think you would be amazing. So
I'd be happy.
All right, I'll send you an email and we'll have you sign up.
Yeah, that sounds great.
But let me ask you one final question that I ask everybody.
Okay.
If you could give one piece of advice to an aspiring artist that you wish you had or that you did have that was really important to you, what would it be?
I would be familiarize yourself with everything that has been made by a human being in the visual arts, especially painting.
That's a tall order right there.
Well, I mean, know your subject before know the subject that you're supposed to be an authority on. That's really important.
Yeah.
And rethink the history, not by reading all sorts of highfalutin theoretical material. Look at the pictures, understand the times they were in. Think a little bit about what the artist was up against. See yourself as someone just like them. Not that they were different, and not to assume that anything done before 1900 is of no use because it's not in the modernist agenda. I would actually encourage them to think of the whole trajectory from Giotto to Carl Andre or to Richard Serra.
I don't think that's going to be an issue with my listeners. My listeners are after the realists, I think.
I know, but if you take the thing, you say, Also, what is good drawing? Ask yourself that all the
Yeah.
time. Sato, not a great draftsman because he didn't draw like Bouguereau. I mean, come on. Would you rather look at a Giotto than a Bouguereau? I would rather look at a Giotto. You
Mm-hmm.
know, um, you know, there are all sorts of questions about art. Know that all art is the same. It's not representational versus abstraction. That is such an old argument and one that was fallacious from the beginning. I would see all painting as value. See the greatness of de Kooning, of Max Beckmann, of Picasso. You know, understand why Cicely Brown is such a great painter because she fearlessly taps into abstract expressionism at a time when then it was absolutely like yesterday's news, and she reinvigorates it, makes it alive again.
Hmm.
See, Mary Cassatt is such a great painter, you know, and you recognize her in spite of the fact that she, you know, people say, oh, she just painted children. And she was
Oh
radical.
gosh, she's so far beyond that.
She's the greatest. So
Yeah.
great. You know, I would think about the relationships between artists that you don't think are related. Like, for example, Marcel Duchamp and Manet. There's a direct.
Wait a minute. Are you a fan of Duchamp as well?
Of course. Are you crazy?
Wow. See, I got to tell you, man, I have so much respect for you. I'm going to rethink a lot of my, I got to really dive deep. I'm going to be the guy who takes your advice more than any of my listeners. I'm going to start reading more because Duchamp is not on my
Listen
list.
to Duchamp was asked, who are your favorite? Who were you looking at and your friends when you were young? Were you looking at Cezanne?
Oh, when I was young, I wasn't looking at anybody. I didn't even, but when I first started, I mean, I love abstract painting. Don't get me wrong. Some of my favorite painters are those like yourself and, you know, painters that combine all that we got from the 20th century, that incredible use of color, of design, abstract concepts and abstract imagery with realism. That's some of my favorite work. You know, I'm kind of bored by just people showing off their drawing and painting skills and just painting things for the sake of painting things. That bores the heck out of me. So that's one end of the spectrum. But
Duchamp too.
what's that?
For Duchamp, those are the painters he didn't like. He called them retinal painters.
Well, and he would be the other end of the spectrum, though. It's where it's like completely void of craftsmanship. It's like, well, don't we need some craftsmanship?
Did you ever see the large glass by Duchamp?
No, I'm just hung up on the urinal, I guess. I need to be more educated.
You know, Bride Strip there by her master's, even the window with the thing. You have to see.
No, I haven't seen it. You're really changing my. You're making me question my worldview here. I'm gonna dig deeper.
Love it all. Duchamp
Yeah.
is not. Duchamp is a hero. He loved Manet. Manet for him was the old. They asked him, "Who did you look at as a young person?" He said, "Did you look at Cezanne?" He said, "No, we thought Cezanne was a flash in the pan." He said, "Well, did you look at Van Gogh and Gauguin?" He goes, "No, we thought they were little coconut guys." Well, who did you look at? He said, "We looked at Manet, and what a great man he was." Then, if you look at the large glass and you look at the three versions of the Execution of Maximilian by Manet, you see the relationship. But what Manet did to perspective, right? And it's the temporal aspect of perspective. What Duchamp did when he froze those objects in the plane of the window, the perspectival window.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many, and the momentariness of Manet, the momentariness of Duchamp. I have a whole argument. I'll send it to you if I can.
I'm very interested in that. Very interested in that. Jeez, man. Duchamp. That's crazy. So you really challenged my worldview. So this is good though. What's that?
The followers of Duchamp, I'm not so interested in. The followers of Warhol, I'm not interested in. But I'm interested in the ones who really were the artists. I don't think I don't like conceptual art. I don't like, although my work is pretty conceptual.
You mean uniquely conceptual? Like there's nothing else to it. It's just all concept.
I don't like the whole, the whole agenda that.
Well, what about the banana?
That's nothing.
Okay, so you're not like so open-minded that you'll just everything is art. It doesn't matter.
Oh, absolutely not.
Okay. Yeah, that made me really interested in looking more into Duchamp then. Okay.
Oh, think critically about this stuff, understanding why someone would do the banana at this time. In a world of post, South Park, post making fun of everything, everything's a joke, and in the disgusting presence of an art world that is fully corrupt and full of garbage and bullshit, is worse than the salon of 1890. It's worse than that right now. If someone does that, they're saying, fuck you, right? The banana's a fuck you, and see it, but then some idiot buys it. But that stuff is going on. For what about the Italian artist who canned his own feces and had it in cans? And he had an exhibition was the stacking of the cans, and then the methane in the cans, caused them to explode one day, which was unanticipated. I mean, this kind of stuff has been going on for a while, making fun of the art world. But I don't want to make fun of art, and because I know what art can be. I think it's kind of a cowardly move to be so cynical about it. Because when you're that cynical, you're working with a safety net underneath you. It's like, I was only joking. I was just poking fun at this and that. What if you reveal yourself, as you say, the artist naked, undraped artist? We do that, and we do it with courage and with cunning. Remember, the painting should be constructed like the perfect prime. Who said that?
I don't know.
Degas. The painting should be constructed by the perfect prime. Paint from your imagination. Use every trick that you know, everything you know about painting, and then add the accents of nature. The painting, totally conceptual, totally invented painting. And what did he say about Manet? Following the casket, he was walking. He was the greatest of all of us. He was the greatest of all of us. They thought Manet was the greatest. Duchamp thought Manet was the greatest. So what is going on with Manet?
I have Micah Christensen. He's an art historian. We'll have to talk. We'll have to get him talking about Manet.
Yeah, bring us both in together. It'd be great.
Oh, that's a good idea. I already have ideas. I'm going to get you on with a few people that can have a good conversation about what is art, because you're bringing some new stuff to not new, but you're bringing some stuff to the table that's really forcing me to question my worldview, which is good. I mean, it's about constant learning and growing.
Yep. Me too. Me too.
Well, thanks again, man. This has seriously been awesome.
Love it. Great talking to you. I'm glad we could do this.
Yeah, I hope to meet you at some point. It'd be great to meet you in person.
Yeah, it'd be great to meet you too.
Thanks for tuning in to the Undraped Artist Podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you could, leave a comment or review. That really helps the channel. Please share the show with your friends, and if you're feeling generous, consider a monthly donation at theundrapedartist.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.